What is up, y'all? I want to talk about let's talk about what would an ASI future look like. I want to talk about this out loud because I think it's very unclear, but if you think through it, there are probably some obvious things that could happen and probably won't happen. For context, I have recently become more of the opinion that maybe O3 is a big deal. I was originally very skeptic. Let me go into that in a second. But what if O3 is a huge deal? What if the future of models is reasoning and reasoning can power intelligence way beyond humans? A lot of people kind of jump the shark and say oh, then humans are all obsolete. I don't think that at all, even remotely. So that's what we should probably talk through. And maybe we should start first though of is O3 legit or not? I have opinions on this because there's really two possible outcomes here. With O3, it's either on one end of the spectrum, it's huge. It's massive. It's this massive breakthrough. Whoops. I don't know how to use a computer. It's this huge, massive breakthrough. And on the other side, it's hype, right? It is a pitch to get investors excited, to raise. I mean, keep in mind one thing. OpenAI has a bajillion-dollar valuation, way larger than any other company's ever had previously. For how young the company is regarding how much it's been in available commercially. So yes, it's been a long time as a nonprofit, a research nonprofit, all this stuff, cool. But in terms of a commercial product, it's been very recent, and the valuation totally skyrocketed. The problem with that is you have to maintain that. So if you have a startup and you go raise money, the first thing you think is let me get the highest valuation possible, because what that means is I'm going to take in, let's just say $10 million. And if my company's valuation is $100 million, then I only gave up 10% of the company for the $100 million. You can do that pretty easily. $10 million out of $100 million valuation, 10%. Great. So that means you maintain as much equity as possible. You still have 90% ownership of that business, and you got a free $10 million. People will take it even further. You'll see some AI companies now raising at insane valuations. You'll see $1 billion valuations. So that is a lot of freaking zeros. Am I doing this right? Also, chat, tell me everywhere you disagree with me too. Did I add too many zeros there? Was that a trillion? 1,000. There's 1,000. There's a million. Nope. That should be a billion, right? In fact, I need to open up the chat. I can't see what people are saying. What's up, y'all? The whole reason why I'm doing this live, by the way, is I want to see where people disagree with me. Like Martin says, I personally feel like O3's biggest downfall will be its cost. However, people need to get their hands on it. It's hype until then. Totally agree. And that's the big question. Okay, the game that O3 is playing is the benchmark game. There's a whole saying that as soon as you measure something to assess the quality of something, it becomes a bad measure because then you start optimizing what you do to game the measurement. So it's not an accurate measure anymore. So we have these benchmarks that say, you'll see these charts that's okay, the models that are best at this, and it'll be O1, and then O1 mini, and then there'll be Claude Sonnet, and then everything else. You'll see these bars. Cool, wonderful. Except how many products actually use O1 in the product? How many users actually use O1 as the model in ChatGPT? Almost none. Why? Because most users find the cost, and in this case, I mean, let's not call it cost because the user doesn't pay the cost. It's really the lag. Sorry, I'm dropping shit here. It's slow. It's super freaking slow. It's painfully slow, and it's not always better. So yes, it's winning benchmarks. It's doing better in benchmarks, but it's not making sense for most users, most products, most of the time. And so, yeah, when you're looking at these billion-dollar valuations, Devin got a billion-dollar valuation. There's other AI companies with no product with a billion-dollar valuation. You have OpenAI having to justify the valuation. So back to the topic of startups, you would think that raising, if your first round of funding is at a billion-dollar valuation, that means you might get you can get $100 million and still be only giving up a tiny, tiny, tiny percent of that company. Awesome. Except you have insane expectations now. If you put a product in the market, that product needs to start making billions in revenue to justify that valuation, or at least tens, hundreds of millions. Because usually you need to make sure that your valuation, you can look at it a number of ways, but a rule of thumb for a company that's not public yet is your valuation you would think is within sort of 10x of your annual revenue. So if you're making If you're worth $1 billion, then you need to be making $100 million a year in revenue. That doesn't take into account cost or anything. Those things do actually matter at this level of valuation, but whatever. It's revenue and growth rate matters too. So if you went from 10 to 100 within a year, that has an impact, whatever. We're not going to get into the nuances. You just need to make as much money as possible. If you're a Devin, you need to get to the point where you're making $100 million a year pretty freaking soon. Now, yes, you have unlimited money, but unlimited money can run out. What often happens is you hire a bunch of people too quickly. The people don't work out. You have a bunch of issues. Another thing that's really common people find in startups, you may have experienced in different teams as well, is a team of 5, when you have greenfield project, can move at like lightning insane speed, right? A team of 5 people, here's your 5 head count, they can move at insane speed. Because they don't have to get every decision approved by a bunch of other people. They don't have this large, complex code base. They don't have to set up all these processes for working amongst themselves. You've got 5 people in a Slack room, in whatever, grinding out code on, pushing it to GitHub, pushing it to, deploy to production. You can move wicked fast. You raise $100 million, now you've got 50 people. You hire 50 people quickly. You have to train all 50 people. It takes an eternity. Hiring the people takes an eternity. Training them takes an eternity. Find the right processes takes an eternity. And now, when your advantage usually as a startup is being really lean and iterative, you don't need a perfect product. You move super fast. But now you have this large group, and it's just really hard to move fast as a large group. I know this firsthand because Builder started at, 4 people, 1 person eventually was me. It moved really fast when it was just me. And now we've got about 100 people. We move a lot slower. And if that scales infinitely. You have 1,000 people and move slower. You have 10,000 slower. And especially the amount of people on one product. You can start spreading sub-team, sub-products, but those have trade-offs as well. Anyway, so this whole world where you have to justify your valuation, if you're not making enough revenue to justify that valuation, you have to do other things. What are the other things? The other thing people start looking at and saying, hey, maybe we can do this instead, is hype. And what is the best way to get hype these days? Benchmarks. Because you can say we have the best model, but if you don't show a benchmark, people don't know. You have to sound smart. You have to look smart. And you have to look smart in a measurable, reproducible way. And so how do you get hype? You win the benchmarks. Going back to OpenAI, OpenAI is, in fact, winning the benchmarks. Let's go back over here. So they've got, let's draw this one again. Sorry, I'm messing around with trying to figure out how to use technology at the same time as streaming here. As people can watch me fumble with technology live. Let's try this again. Come on. We're going to scroll. Okay, let's use this to scroll. So anyway, you'll see these benchmarks where it's always, here's the different lines, and this big long tail. And then O1 is the top here. But again, we talked about this. Nobody's using O1, right? We tried hooking up O1 to Builder for code generation, code modification, code customization. Terrible, crazy slow, absurdly slow. Users hated it. Was not better than Claude Sonnet. But it wins the benchmarks. So it gets the hype. People say, oh yeah, that one. That's the good one. But nobody's fucking using it. Nobody wants to pay that cost. Builder using O1 would cost us 10x more per user. If you add the price of the model, per token, and the amount of tokens it outputs, terrible. I try and use ChatGPT with O1. I get horrible results. And keep in mind, I'm taking in I'm counting in that it's slower. So by horrible, I mean I'm getting as bad of results of 4.0. Some things LLMs are good at, some things are not. Now I have theories on how some of this stuff can be better, which I'll get into. But as of right now, if you want to win hype, and if you're OpenAI and valuing yourself at 100 billion, I forget. Chat, you can tell me the correct number, but 100 billion or so valuation for a private company that's been in market, with commercial product for only a few years, is insane. Now they do have the revenue to back it up, but there's a huge issue they have, which is as soon as they put out a model, people copy it fast. DeepSeek is amazing. Claude Sonnet destroys their models. We saw QCQ, another Chinese model that can compete with O1. As soon as they put something out, people can start testing it. They can start reverse engineering it. There's another paper that came out from China showing how to replicate O1. It's not necessarily how one works, but it was very much if you want to build your own O1, this is how you do it. It's amazing. So that creates this crazy cost pressure because, basic sort of economics is if you have a commoditized product, you have a product where other people can replicate the same product, then everyone wants the lowest cost version, So, and there's this other kind of saying around this whole area too, where if you are renting someone else's hardware, or let's put it this way, if the biggest cost you have is compute and you don't own the compute, you're not vertically integrated in that way, you will lose. And so some people are already speculating that OpenAI will lose and actually take a big downfall because they put out a model, everybody has the same model. Everybody starts getting, the reason there's a long tail here is all the models start performing the same at a certain point. All the open source models, they all perform the same. And then the bar keeps going up, and the next thing you know, the graph looks kind of like this. All the models eventually perform the same. And so OpenAI has to keep staying ahead and say, hey, we're better. Again, because they don't own compute. So if you are, let's talk about that for a second. So if all the models perform the same, you want the cheapest one. That's just inevitable. A Builder is a product that uses LLMs. We're always looking at what's the best ratio of good, fast, cheap. Usually fast and cheap go hand in hand because if it's low compute cost, it goes fast and it goes cheap. If it's high compute cost, then it's slow and it is expensive. And we don't want our users to pay anything more than like $20 a month per user, right? More than that would be crazy. So who's going to win? Is it going to be OpenAI, who has to rent service from Microsoft, and Microsoft has to make a cut, and OpenAI has to make a cut? Or is it just going to be Microsoft running an open source model? That's always going to be cheaper. AWS running an open source model will always be cheaper for Amazon and most importantly for the end user than OpenAI, who has to charge a premium on top. So in this world, if everyone can always catch up to OpenAI, they will lose. It'll be a race to the bottom. Everybody needs cheap compute, cheap electricity. That's why all these AI companies are investing in nuclear power. They want the cheap, infinite energy, and they want to have the lowest cost compute. OpenAI can't win this game if people keep copying them. So what they have to do is say, well, we're the smartest. We're not going to be the cheapest. We're the best, right? OpenAI is the best. How do they do that? They keep beating the benchmarks. And recently they started deciding they don't give a shit about cost. And they don't give a shit if people are using their model. Nobody's using O1. Again, chat, tell me if you're using O1. If you have a use case where O1 kills it for, great. I have personally found, like I was in Japan for the last couple weeks. This was on my honeymoon. I just got married. And I was using ChatGPT like crazy. And ChatGPT lies to me a lot. In fact, I'm supposed to be keynoting at DevWorld conference in Amsterdam on Tuesday, but because ChatGPT lied to me, I might not be able to go. Because I was supposed to fly to India, actually. I'm supposed to be in India right now, but I'm not. But I learned that you can't fly to India if you have less than 6 months before your passport expires. Mine expired in 5. What did ChatGPT tell me? ChatGPT said, oh, go get an emergency passport. So I go to the embassy. I was in Korea, actually, at that moment. In South Korea, U.S. Embassy in Seoul. And I say, hey, I need an emergency passport. And they said, hey, does India accept an emergency passport? And I said, yes. And in my head, I'm like, shit, ChatGPT told me that. Did I fact check that? I don't know. I think I did, but maybe I didn't. And my fact checking was too soft. As a quick side note, oh my God, I always click the search button in ChatGPT. So hold on, let's get out of here. Let's open up a new chat. There we go. I always click here, you can't do it with O1. That's another problem with O1. I always click the search button these days because if I don't have firsthand sources, ChatGPT lies to me so freaking much and I forget that it lies and then I do something stupid. And so guess what happened? I went to the embassy. I got an emergency passport, which destroys my old passport. Guess what? India doesn't take an emergency passport. Neither does Amsterdam. Neither does Holland. So now I can't go to this conference in February. I'm supposed to be keynoting because ChatGPT lied to me. If I had done nothing and just kept my normal passport, I'd be fine. Now I'm trying to rush order a new passport and all this stuff. John says, let me talk to my lawyer. Is your lawyer ChatGPT? It kind of is for me. But anyway, ChatGPT freaking lies. I tried. I'm like, oh, but what if I used O1? O1 made him smarter. I went back and asked all the prompts to O1, and no, it gave me just as stupid answers. I was like, maybe it'll think it through and be like, oh, well, an emergency passport may not be accepted by India because an emergency passport, I learned later, ChatGPT didn't mention any of this stuff, is only meant for you to come home. Like you lose your passport abroad, you need an emergency passport to get home. It's not for going to other countries. ChatGPT left all that out. Anyway, my point here is not to vent about that. It's that O1 wasn't any smarter. I also tried Google's deep research and really cool. I visited like 1,000 links. Terrible results. Nobody was able to tell me what 1,000 calls to embassies told me, which is it ain't gonna happen. They won't take the emergency passport because the visa I had was attached to a different passport, blah, blah, blah. I did my own Googling, my own research. I do think AI will get better at that. Don't get me wrong. But the important point of all of this is these benchmarks don't take into account the cost and speed. So when you see these benchmarks and they say O1 is best, they don't point out that no one's using it because it's too slow and it's too expensive. O3 shot that up by like 100x. O3 is insanely expensive. Basically, I think OpenAI just said, fuck it, YOLO. Like, there is no need. It doesn't matter. Like the VC valuations and the hype has nothing to do with if people use your model anymore. They are not winning on models that are useful anymore. They're really not. Claude has destroyed them and keeps destroying them. There's no GPT-5. We haven't seen one. We've seen all these reports from OpenAI employees saying the GPT-5 that they're not calling it. That's another thing. They're redefining GPT-5 and saying maybe it won't ever come. They're redefining what AGI means. We'll get back to that. AGI, it doesn't mean, it means this new thing and all this other stuff. Like stop. And there's this new term ASI, which I want to get back to because there's still a possibility this happens. But I really do want to cover in depth, like all the reasons to be skeptical first, because there's so many fucking reasons. If they can't win better models, they're throwing insane compute and insane cost and saying, well, we can be smarter if we make it really high cost. And what does Sam Altman say? He's like, it'll get cheaper. Of course, it always gets cheaper, but it's insanely expensive now. Like it has to get like 1,000x cheaper. And if you watch Prime, the Primeagen, he made a good point. A 10x improvement in cost would be a major breakthrough. Incredible, right? Throw a 10x improvement and the model, prune the model in the smartest way to get a 10x improvement. Amazing. And then let's say hardware, Grok, Cerebras, these new hardware, they give you another 5x. They give you another 10x improvement. Still, we're 100x better, but we're still 10x worse than the current state. And again, these models are only better sometimes. They keep saying it's PhD level. Yeah, but I don't need a PhD to tell me like how to get a passport or like to debug some code for me. And they're coding it. Don't get me started on the coding example. The coding example they showed to say like this is so smart is something Claude could have easily done too. It was not impressive, but whatever. We'll park that for a second. So OpenAI's not caring about cost or time or usefulness. They're just caring about smarter. So let's go over to ARC. I really want to talk about ARC here. So ARC is this benchmark that's supposed to test generalization of LLMs. And I really want to, oops, my device is low power. Hold on, everybody. I need to I'm having fun drawing here, but I need to be able to do it without it running out of power. We're almost there, 1 sec. So ARC, where's the port? Hold on. Watch me struggle with technology in real time, everybody. Okay. ARC is not as exciting as I think people are making it out to be. Oh my God. Sorry. Computers. Computers are hard. Here we go. Cable management. Okay. ARC is not as exciting, in my opinion, as people make it out to be. It is and it isn't. The part that is, I think the problem is maybe it is exciting. It's not useful, in my opinion. I might be proven wrong. And again, chat, let me know if you think I'm fucking wrong, because I want to nitpick this logic. Because there is a really, really, really cool part about O3 and O1, and I'll get back to that. But there's a lot of excessive hype here. And again, if you can't have the better models and you can't make them more money, and margins will drive your value down as people copy your models, the position OpenAI is in, then they need to hype. They have to hype. They have no other option than to hype. So what are they hyping? Oh, we killed it on the ARC benchmark. So the ARC benchmark is not a measure of usefulness at all. Showed their older models did very bad, and then O1 takes this big freaking leap, and they're like, oh, amazing, right? I've showed other data before about how all the models are plateauing. You take a more useful benchmark, and you look at the models, and they're all kind of like rounding off. Like new models come out, this is time, and this is sort of quality, and they sort of round off. And people say like, yo, that's how it's meant to be. The benchmark's not perfect, and you can only get so high. Yeah. But there's a lot of different benchmarks. And I'll just tell you it this way. We make a product. We make a product we sell to users. And so we are constantly looking at like what models are doing better, and we're testing new models. And I'll tell you there were two breakthroughs. One was massive, one was useful. The first breakthrough was GPT 2 to 3 to 3.5. So when you got to 3.5, holy moly, it was really useful. You put natural language in, you get natural language out. And in my opinion, a lot of that was just the way they trained the model. So rather than just being next token prediction, the training data probably more looked like a chat. So they just had, this is what's kind of cool about LLMs in my opinion. You can use, to a limited extent, the current generation LLMs to train the new generation. Not to make them smarter per se, but to change the input-output formats to match what would be more easy to use. And I think this is probably what O1 is doing to some extent as well. So instead of just like text, where if you looked at like GPT-2 or 3, it would be like feed it text and you would get text back, but all this weird stuff, like if you had too many spaces, it would go crazy. And so they switched to the training data. This is what I just assume. They switched the training data to be more like question, answer, right? And used a lot of question, answer. And so now you can just feed it question, answer, and get it. So it's basically taking the same methodology, but a data format that we humans can work with. It was just chat. We found chat works great. Awesome. That was a huge breakthrough because it was really hard to use LLMs before. At the time of GPT-2 and 3, prompt engineering was like an actual real thing. I'm definitely personally of the belief that engineer is a very generous term for prompt modification, especially since GPT 3.5. So that was the first big leap, in my opinion. These things were not useful to the average person or even the average developer, and then they suddenly were. GitHub Copilot was good, and don't even get me started on GitHub Copilot. It seemed to really plateau, and there's way better products than Copilot now. They seem to just be celebrating their billions of dollars, not actually making their product better. Thank goodness for Cursor and Windsurf, really good too, and Bolt and Lovable, etc. Anyway, the other big breakthrough was Claude 3.5 Sonnet. The breakthrough there was coding accuracy. So Claude 3.5 Sonnet. Now Opus was this good too, but Sonnet made it a lot cheaper. Opus was really good at taking code and updating the code where the code would still evaluate. So you can get code in, code out, but the code out would actually compile. It would actually run. It would not have weird, dumb errors. Well, I don't think that's like a 10x smartness improvement. That was a 10x usefulness improvement. Now, that's why we have Cursor going crazy with their compose mode and Bolt. Like all these products that are skyrocketing in valuation are not because they built the smartest brains for coding. They built a wrapper over Sonnet. Sonnet is just really freaking good because it is accurate. That was huge. OpenAI is not winning the coding game. They really, really are not. They were even advertising O1 like, oh, O1's going to do tremendous at coding or whatever. So let's talk about ARC. So the thing about ARC is I think most people, if you ask, so the idea of ARC is it's now that they're coming out with ARC 2, it's like this ever-moving target of what is easy for a person but hard for AI, right? So what are things that are not in the training data at all that we can ask a person and they're like, yeah. So these like examples you saw where you have like, this shape and then shape with a line and then, shape and then like, what is next? Oh, shape with a line. The AI would be like, I don't fucking know. It's like, well, a person would be like, yeah, you just add a line. LLMs weren't good at that. They weren't trained on anything like this. As a side note, ARC does provide training data, so you actually can train on ARC, but I think the idea is each question is still so general that you're not going to quite get, it's still going to be hard for the AI. Now, if I went and asked the average ChatGPT user before telling you that this is hard for AI, I bet you they would have said, of course AI can answer that. Like AI answers all kinds of my questions. Of course it can decipher that you can add a line there. Like ARC is looking for the edge cases. And I don't think it's a breakthrough to say that the AI now can figure out where to add a line. It's cool. It's theoretically very cool. I don't think it's useful. So a lot of people are saying, oh, this went from, pretty low to very high in ARC. That means shit's going to happen. I don't think any of this shit's going to happen because this shit's not useful at all. Like if you could show me a fucking use for ARC and these add a line or add a color, change the color, cool. But I think the point is it's testing useless things. The useful things are in the benchmarks we already use today that the AI is pretty good at. The useless things are what ARC is measuring. Now, it is cool that the AI is generalizable. But I think this idea of AGI is really dumb and overblown because there's been this assumption that general intelligence is better intelligence. Or put it this way, General intelligence is more useful intelligence. I think it's already clear by the fact that ChatGPT is literally just a box. You can type whatever the fuck you want. It's general, right? This is the most general product ever. And usually general products are dangerous because you want guardrails around making sure people only do what works well. This is the world's most general product. So saying that it's more general intelligence, I really don't care. It's good at general coding. And again, I pretty much never use O1. It's usually a waste of time. So I don't think AGI is that interesting. What is interesting though, and this may sound like I'm just mincing words, and maybe I am, is ASI. And so this is where if you put all that aside, where like, okay, I just totally brain dumped all the reasons to be skeptical, all the reasons why OpenAI would want to lie to you. They have financial incentive to fucking lie to you. There's a million reasons to hype this. And also, keep in mind, this drives me fucking crazy, by the way. So this is not something I really fully understood until like I started putting content on the interwebs. I'll give everyone a secret. You cannot trust fucking anything you see on the internet in one specific way, which is, and this is why there's clickbait media. This is why there is sensationalism in the news. I'll make it super simple. If I put out a video saying O3 is not that big of a deal, who's going to watch it? Fucking nobody. It'll totally underperform. Nobody will watch that video. That title saying something is not interesting is a video nobody will click on and nobody will watch because it's people want to see something interesting. So what happens? The opposite is highly effective. If I put out a video, and I refuse to do this, but a lot of people, the people who are making content and getting a lot of viewers, they don't refuse to do this because this fucking works. One of the greatest counterexamples is Primogen. He's very good at saying this is bullshit and making content people want to see. The average person, the easy mode that 99% of people use is OpenAI comes out with O3 and they make a video with a shocked face. Everything has changed now. Your life is going to change. And then if you're scrolling through YouTube and you're like, oh my God, the world just changed. I need to see what changed. How's it going to affect me? And they're like, yeah, O3 smashed the benchmarks. They're just repeating OpenAI's fucking marketing. They just take the same thing. OpenAI shared almost no information on this, by the way. There's so many holes in the information we've been shared, but they're like, yeah, oh my God, OpenAI is going to change the world. There's not going to be developers anymore. Blah, 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 blah. That shit kills it. That absolutely kills on content. Everybody's going to view that. I'll take another example. If somebody says, and Bolt is a great product, by the way. I'm going to pick on it for only 1 second. If somebody tweets, I just made an incredible app in 5 minutes on Bolt. I saw another tweet that was like, I just fired my whole engineering team. No, you fucking didn't. There's no chance. Or you had terrible engineers. But like, I also listened to a podcast where the guy was like, a very well-known podcast. It was All In. And Chamath is like, my 30-person engineering team is doing the work of 300 people. No, they're fucking not. There's no chance they are. Unless they're absolute idiots. And the idiot AI is fucking idiotic, by the way. AI is dumb. AI is very dumb. It's cool and useful when used right. It is dumb by default. And let's get back to that because that's like, I think, a topic of, I think we can have true artificial super intelligence and it can still be very dumb. And I'll explain that. I think we can use some examples in like pop culture because I think this has been explored before in media. But unless your engineers are idiots and like garbage AI generated code is better than their code, so maybe they 10x'd each. They went from like, I'll put it this way. These AIs are trained on the average code of the internet. So if average is here and you are 10% of the average, then yes, AI can 10x you because it's going to bring you to the average. So fuck yeah. You're dumb and you got 10x'd. Dumb is kind of mean. You might be a beginner. Everybody starts dumb. I am dumb at most things, right? 99.999% of things I am dumb and everybody's dumb at, right? If you're not an expert in it, then bringing you to the median is good. There are some cases, though, where the median is bad. If you don't know, coding is the number one use for AI. Code. Maybe you're not surprised because you're watching me because you're a developer, but also you probably see all the stuff AI is taking over. This and that. Code is the number one use case. It's actually commercially useful. There are products that are making money. It is good. Writing and I believe research were the next couple. And there's a bit of a margin here. Like code really is the winning use case by far right now. The problem with writing is it can help with grammar cleanup, this and that. But there are some things where the median is the worst possible situation. So the example of that is marketing. So if this is the median, if you sound like every other website, every other marketing, that's the most garbage marketing possible, especially because most of the training data is old. It's been around since a good amount of time ago. So if you're kind of basing your marketing off of how people wrote blog posts, let's say 5 years ago, it's going to sound like absolute hot garbage. And so nobody's going to read it. It sounds bad. So AI is really, really, really bad at marketing. But let's kind of keep going further and talk about. By the way, are you guys getting background noise? Hold on. My wife is playing a podcast really loud behind me. Hold on. I need to send a message to be like, dude, can you please not podcast so loud? Yo, podcast super loud. I'm on live stream. Anybody who's married can relate to this. Please use headphones. Okay, we're back. And if the background noise was there, it should be gone. Okay, we back. Well, let's get to the chat. What am I catching so far? What am I missing so far? Because I think we're going to start to get back into how ASI could happen. With all those caveats, how could ASI happen? I see a couple questions here, though. And actually, let me give one other example here, too. Actually, an AI-generated podcast. That's going to be like Notebook LM was amazing in terms of what it did, but it really wasn't actually used by me regularly. So I've heard it's good for studying, and I'm not somebody who's like studying, and so maybe listening to that in headphones format is really, really good. That's a really good example, in my opinion, of super impressive technology, really cool novel use case, like impressive products. Like Google's been really impressive in general lately, which I think is amazing. Like they finally are like, hey, we can AI too. We invented AI originally. We can do the AI. Hell yes. But it's going to make a bad podcast. Like nobody is going to ever have an AI generate a podcast or a TikTok video or whatever and actually have a good channel people want to watch. People have tried. People are trying right now like crazy, repeatedly, constantly. Is my wife listening to an AI generated podcast? Maybe she's listening to Notebook LM. Maybe. No, I don't think so. Anyway, I guess people talk about podcasts because of my situation. Anyway, aren't I... Oh, this is a good question. Am I financially incentivized to debunk AGI? Fuck no. This is the crazy thing. I am so financially incentivized to hype AI. Why? Because I make a fucking AI product. Like, I will make more money if I convince more people that AI is going to change the world and that you need to adopt AI, the AI bandwagon, that you should not be writing as much code. You should be taking Figma designs and you should be converting those to code for you because the AI is so good. The AI is so much better than you. And so Figma to code, you should never do by hand. Everyone should buy Builder as the product to do that. AI. I can't live myself if I did that. I can only be comfortable being super blunt about what is working in AI and what is not. Because I'd have trouble I'm not good at lying. I'll put it that way. Like as in my job as CEO, I'm super transparent and people know that. I don't do well with a lie because then you have to remember all this shit that you told people and blah, blah, blah. I am so much more comfortable being like, hey, I just tell people I'm super transparent. I'm just going to tell you exactly what I think. And I'm going to sleep better at night and you're going to know exactly what's going on at all times. And hopefully if I do something weird, it makes sense because you have all the context of what I believe. I told myself I would do that until it bites me. Like I would do that until it causes problems because I know most people don't do that. And it hasn't caused a single problem yet ever. It caused like one small problem one time. I was like too honest about something, but it was pretty minor and it was pretty infrequent. And that's maybe a case of, I think in companies too much, people sometimes will make a mistake, want to never make the mistake again, and change the rules or change the process to avoid the mistake. And in doing so, make the happy path worse. And I'm pretty obsessed with like leanness and efficiency and iteration and speed. And what comes with speed is mistakes. You have to be okay with mistakes. You have to be comfortable with mistakes. We have to want to make mistakes. Mistakes are part of the process. So I don't try and design process to avoid mistakes. You almost want to maximize mistakes. Casey's asking about future of CMS. I have a lot of opinions on future CMS, but I promised that I would talk about ASI. I gave all the caveats of why OpenAI is probably lying to you, but they might not be. It's very possible is AI let's take the total opposite argument. ASI is fucking coming. Let's take the arguments, and I mean this genuinely. I'm not doing this as a hypothetical. I'm like, hey, what if we actually get to a point where computers are genuinely smarter than us? Like, let's say, let's take an example. I believe it was in the 80s. It was like 80. Oh God, it was like in the early 80s. The Apple II came out, and VisiCalc came out, the first ever Google Sheets, basically first ever Excel, first ever spreadsheet program on a computer, and that was the killer use case. Like the whole reason Apple exists as a company. Steve Jobs has even said this. I don't know how to spell Apple apparently. The whole reason Apple exists as a company is they built the Apple II, but it wasn't selling well until VisiCalc came out. And then that was the killer use case. The computer wasn't useful until the software was useful. And there was there's word processors back then. There were basic games back then. There were whatever the hell. Spreadsheets were computers are good at math. And when you have to do math in like a spreadsheet format where you have these columns and rows and changing the value in one place, like changing this value needs to update this one based on from some formula, spreadsheets are killer. Even if it was probably hard to use back then because it was pretty new software. But if I can just change this value to something else, and now it recomputes this value to that, it's incredible. It's incredible for business planning. We use spreadsheets like crazy for anything financial. Obviously, it's the obvious thing to do. That was the killer use case. And there was a time where accountants thought, holy shit, my job is done. My degree is heavily math focused. My skill set is math, arithmetic, and spreadsheets. And now that's all automated. I am useless. That was a real fear people had. You can look up real articles of accountants afraid of their jobs. If you actually look at the job data of accountants, it went up after VisiCalc. Why? Because now each accountant was 10x more powerful. They could automate all the tedious stuff. Basically, a chunk, let's call it half. Half of their work could just be automated. And the other half became like 10x more valuable because they can have huge impact. They can model things faster and more accurately. They can get more involved on the strategic side. What do these numbers mean? They're spending less time crunching through the numbers and recalculating the numbers based on different sort of, say, business scenarios. And instead, they're just focusing on strategy improvements, etc. In this world, this could happen with us and many, many, many other things. So let's imagine ASI is here, and it's just straight up smarter than you. Now, there's still a lot of limitations, right? So let's say you ask a specific question. Right now, we know these LLMs work with like a specific input and output. So we ask the question and we get the answer. And we get, what is it, like 100K, I forget the context window size. We get something in the ballpark of 100K tokens. Beautiful, fantastic. So a lot of the art, what Cursor and Bolt and others doing is the art is filling that context with the right information, putting the right stuff in here so that you get the right answer. So what files are included, it will do things like vector search. That's the most common thing. So usually a tool like Cursor will index your files via vectors. Vectors are a big thing that powers LLMs. They basically can take a thing, say a sentence, a token, whatever, and rate it by a lot of dimensions on how it relates to other things. And you basically get this more sort of semantic search. So rather than a search by words, you get a search by sort of like almost meaning. It's not quite meaning, but you can get it. What is the right term? There's a proper term for this, but you can do search by actual like the meaning. So for example, the meaning of during along certain axes, a vector will know dog and cat effectively are animals. It's not actually like that. It's not actually like hierarchical like that. But it'll know that these two things are related. So if I want stuff about animals, it's going to pull information about animals. These things don't have to have the word animal in them. So if you look at like how Google search works or a typical keyword search, this sentence or whatever would have to have the word animal to match animal. That's no longer the case. That's great. So that actually means we can pull in semantic. Yes. Looking for semantic search. This is matching things based off semantics across a whole lot of dimensions. Super cool. So super useful. We can pile in that context and get answers. And there's maybe a day where the AI is just better at this than us. And that's great. I would not mind a day where I can just show the AI a file and say, where's the bugs? But keep in mind, you as a human are a lot more than just a look at code and get bugs, right? You usually take things step by step. So this is where O3 gets interesting because it's apparently really, really good at step by step. And it can do, so there's one really, really interesting innovation to me, which is it can rank correctness, or what they call it. It can identify its own rewards based on reward. I don't know how to spell reward correctness. So it can tell you, or it can decide. It can go through a bunch of different it'll go one by one through a bunch of like probabilities. Here's one correct potential answer path. Here's another path. Here's another path. And it can go back and be like, this must be the most correct. That's interesting to me because this is something LLMs used to be really bad at. When I first made microagent, so that's the thing, I'll spell it because I'm bad at talking, microagent. The insight there is you can make AI agents that do a thing on a loop as long as they can test the thing at each stage and know if they did it correctly. And that's how things like Devin work. When Devin works, Devin will do that. Devin will run, or a much better example is Klein. If you're not familiar with Klein, I want to get a video out on that soon. Very cool. Klein will figure out, it's not like magic. It's going to look at your package JSON and be like, oh, your build command is npm run build. And it'll run that, and it'll see the errors, and it'll update the code again until the errors are resolved. Super cool. That's like what microagent does as well. Microagent's a little bit more manual, so I think Klein is definitely the future here. Microagent was more manual. You would supply like a file. You'd say, here's my file.ts. And it would infer some of the stuff. It would figure it out on its own. And you can say, my command is like npm run test. And it'll run the test, see what failed, update the file in a loop until it passed. Great. I tried lots of other things where the LLM would decide if things are in an okay state. For example, microagent also tried to do this thing called, what do we call it? Visual matching, where it would look at your code. You would provide like a URL. It'd be like localhost/about, and it would look at a screenshot, and it would compare them. It would be like, does this look like this? And if not, it would keep correcting. And I could not, to save my life, get the LLM to actually reliably like grade itself. Like say, how close are these two screenshots? I would try to give it all these dimensions. I would try to give me a number rating back, maybe 0.9. And if the threshold is better than 0.95, we would take it. It was way too random and all over the place. Getting the LLM to evaluate itself in any format that I've ever tried, like I would try and like have one LLM generate code and then another LLM or just another thread evaluate it and say 1 to 10, is this good code? And no matter how specific you try to get, what is the rating system? What is the criteria? It was way too random. So I never believed in, when you have this kind of idea of like, any agent has to do an action and then verify, right? Am I doing the right thing? I never could get the LLM to verify itself. Another example is I built something that I hear OpenAI is working on too, which is a browser extension that you could tell it a dream of mine is the world where I can just tell an agent to go through my inbox. Here's all the newsletters, or I get a newsletter I don't want, and I can just tell it, go unsubscribe from this. So it'll read the email. It'll find the unsubscribe link. It'll go to that page. It'll see if there's other steps. Sometimes there is, sometimes there's not. It'll re-input my email address if that's needed. I'm pretty sure that's illegal, by the way. You need to have like a one-click, but whatever. It'll add the correct email address. It'll fill out whatever steps. Sometimes it's horrible. Sometimes it's like, oh, you got to go to settings. You got to log in with username and password. And you got to find the setting. Blah, blah, blah. My ideal is I can just tell an agent, go do that. And so I built something a while ago, and I know other people have experimented with this too, of like, yeah, can we do that? Can we feed in the DOM? So we've got a browser and we've got the DOM, and we basically just tell the AI, the LLM, especially with these larger context windows we have now, and say, here's the DOM. You have to filter down to meet the token limit, but just give it a simplified version of the DOM and say, your task is to, let's say, a better one would be you look at your credit card statement and you're like, actually, I want to remove my Netflix subscription. So you just say, hey, you just tell it unsub from Netflix. And so it'll go to Netflix. If it gets hit by a login window, it'll come to you and say, hey, I need to log in. Back in the GPT 3.5 days, it was terrible at this too, like just deciding that it needed to go to the user. I've seen some examples that show the contrary. I think Devin, for example, sometimes knows pretty well if it should go back to you. I think Sonnet is better at this stuff. But that's the idea. It could then log in. It could then be like, oh, let me find a settings link. So it finds settings. It would have specific actions it can do, like click and a selector, like dot settings, and it can go through a set of actions. Now, the problem is that I always ran into this is it could not effectively evaluate if it was on track or not. So what would always happen in my experience is it would just derail. It would just get lost, and it would be in a page that makes no sense, and it just wouldn't know, and it would just kind of keep going. And if you ever use something like Auto GPT as well, oh man, that thing derails. We tried to do this kind of scraping thing one time. A friend of mine did, and it just derailed so hard, so fast. It just was not useful. So O3, in theory, can better catch its derails. And if you say for right now, O3 is good at doing a chain of things and then eventually saying, I think this is the answer. And that involves picking this out and saying, hey, I evaluated the viability of each of these ideas, and this one seems best. That is, I don't know if I want to call it a breakthrough, but I can say, hey, that's useful. And you can mentally abstract out and say, okay, if O3 can think in steps, maybe a future version, O4, or maybe it's O5, can take actions in steps. It can take an action, one of these is maybe an action, 2, 3, and then evaluate if it accomplished the goal. That's kind of interesting. So let's assume for a second that it will be smarter than us. For example, when I was on this honeymoon trip to Japan, I think that I used ChatGPT a million times. It was a good idea sometimes, it's a bad idea sometimes. But let's say I just had a super AI, a super crazy smart AI that could just look over my shoulder and just tell me, you're doing that wrong, or that's a bad idea, or there's a flaw in your logic. It'd be really interesting. Like, let's say the average, let's play an extreme thought experiment. And let's say this is coming. And I actually believe it's very possible it is. That the average intelligence of a human is here, and the average intelligence of an AI is here. By intelligence, how do you want to define that? I don't know. But like reasoning ability, task accomplishment, it can find flaws in your logic and implement things better than you. I watched the movie, what is the name of that thing? The Wild Robots, while I was on a plane. And this was a freaking great example. It reminded me of something like C-3PO or others too. The Wild Robot is crazy smart. It knows a bajillion things, but it's also a complete idiot. It does not know how to deal with, it can deal with sort of unknowns. How do I describe? It's really hard to describe. Or like C-3PO, right? You don't just go tell, C-3PO probably has unlimited knowledge, right, of things, and can observe what you're doing and point out, like, you're doing something dumb, like, wait, this is a bad idea, da-da-da. But C-3PO was not competent to just go do things, right? It was not like the actual best end-to-end executor of something. So you wouldn't like create a company of C-3POs where C-3PO is the CEO. And if you let's actually look at this for a second. OpenAI thinks that the steps to, they call it AGI or ASI. I think this is the steps to ASI or something. I forget. There's a name for this. One is, I can't remember. It's basically what they always do. 2 is reasoning. 3 is agents. What is 4? Hold on, let's look this up. What is OpenAI's steps to ASI? Is that what they call it? 5 stages of AI development. That's what it is. Hold on, let's go through this. There we go. So we are at level 1, chatbots. We're getting to, in their division, level 2, reasoners. Level 3 is agents, so they can take actions. And just so you know, AI could always take actions. The issue is, you need to have a lot more, the percent of the success rate needs to be a lot higher. Oops, sorry, this is slightly off screen. Let me fix this for y'all. There we go. The success rate has to be way higher than it is today for you to feel comfortable with the AI taking actions on your behalf. Right? It's totally okay for it to return some garbage to you and you decide if you want to act on it or not. It's not okay for it to start like writing and sending emails on your behalf if it's got some garbage ideas behind it, or pushing code to production or whatever, right? So that's why Devin is okay-ish, because it sends a PR and you can say, this is garbage, and you just reject it. Not the end of the world. But let's say let's go further. Innovators, AI that can aid in innovation. You could say AI is sort of doing that now, right? If it's assisting you in coding and you're building an innovative thing, then there you go. The AI is aiding in innovation, kind of. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what they're talking about for this level 4, because obviously with level 4 they think it's like some new thing. So I think they're thinking like this is AI getting creative and it's coming up with better ideas. Would there be a world where the AI can just come up with a better invention, right? Remember when the AirPods came out, when Apple was like, holy shit, like what if we just took earbuds? And this is an interesting thing about Apple, by the way. Apple doesn't give a shit about cost either, right? Well, everybody's making like all kinds of different sort of wired headphones and wireless headphones, and they're competing on sound quality. So there were the high end that went for high quality audio, Sennheiser, etc. And then there was also price, and people were really looking at the quality price ratio. Apple said, well, the problem is we like the lightweight form factor, very portable. We can put a pretty good quality speaker in there, but we can't fit a big battery. So these things are going to die quickly. So you can, if you forget about price for a second and say quality, and you add another thing, which is like usability, and get clever and say, oh, we're going to put a battery in the case. We're going to make it super simple. You always want to put them in the case so that they recharge, so they have a home, that you don't lose these earbuds, and they recharge in the case where you can put a big battery. That's a great idea. Now, I was just in Asia, and there are these stores that sell a million different AirPod clones. And they're not necessarily AirPod clones. They're like, it's like when the iPhone came out. If you look at cell phones before and after the iPhone, they looked all kinds of different ways, and they all looked like iPhones after. If you looked at popular Bluetooth headphones before AirPods and after AirPods, they all look like AirPods, right? I have, obviously Apple owns Beats, but I have Beats earbuds because they stay in my in my ears better when I run. But Apple basically found a very clever improvement to usability. So, that's arguably what OpenAI is saying here, is like, what if the AI can come up with better ideas? Say, hey, there's a better way. Now, I'm very skeptical of this. I'll get into why. But honestly, you never know. There could be any innovation at any time. I've been wrong about my skepticism plenty of times before. But the fifth one that's really interesting, organizations, right? So this is the idea of like when AutoGPT, the first sort of like agent project ever that got some traction, came out, the number one use case they pushed is basically an AI that makes money. Let's have an AI start a business and be successful at a business. And that's interesting. And this whole idea, think of organizations, going back over here, is like, yeah, what if the AI was in charge of other AIs, could kind of do things concurrently, and ultimately make money? Now, if you think about it today, there's a lot of ways you can make money. And this is where I think we start getting into what the sort of like C3PO ASI world could look like. AI that's smarter than us, but doesn't at all replace us. And I'm not thinking that way because I want that to happen. I'm thinking that way because I think people are very quick to assume that hockey sticks in progress will not soon plateau. Everything works in S-curves. There's been a million hockey stick progresses and eventually hit a plateau, and you never know where that plateau is. I genuinely thought the plateau was coming when we got through the sort of like, when we had this sort of plateau in, call it the GPT era models. OpenAI, again, they're incentivized to do this whether it's true or not, but they're trying to make the argument that the reasoning models, the O-star versions of models, are going to be another huge jump. And in typical OpenAI fashion, I think they're trying to position it as it's going to be a big, big jump. And so there's this meme, or not a meme, there's this sort of like thing that kind of gets circulated from time to time. It's this comic where it's sort of like this upward progress, and there's this guy, and he's like looking up at it, and it's like, what does it look like? What does it feel like to be on the edge of one of these insane sort of breakthroughs where everything changes and you finally hit, like humans, I feel like for years have had this belief that we're going to finally hit exponential improvement in technology that doesn't stop. Now, historically, it's always stopped. Every time. 100 out of 100, 100% times, it always plateaus. This always happens. You just never know when. Could be now. I do think when the plateau starts to happen is when you start to see hype around products that don't get traction. And I do fear, part of me fears O1 is an example of that. Now, you could also argue O1 is the first of its kind. GPT-2 got hype but not traction. And you're right, GPT-3 and then 4 came out and bam, traction happened. But there's good reason to be skeptical too, because when you suddenly start realizing you're here and you realize you've got investors, you need them to think that this is coming later, and you need to convince the world like, no, better is coming. But I hate this idea that people tend to have of like, this is going to get better forever. There's this guy, Ray Kurzweil, who had these stupid predictions where he's like, oh, the event horizon of AI will happen, the singularity. He said, who fucking knows? There was always moving dates, and he thought he had all his data, but he just extrapolated excessively. But anyway, this guy was always like, in 2023, this was many years ago, AI is going to advance so fast, it's going to be self-improving. That's a big one that gets thrown around, self-improving. We can look at that one in detail too. But when AI is self-improving, you can never predict. I don't buy that, personally. We're going to have these sort of like leaps and bounds forever. And so, is that true, Fuzzy Bear? Did he say it's going to be in 2025? 1,000 days in. But anyway, the plateau always comes. And I think it's very possible that the AI that is genuinely smarter than us, if you ask a human a question, if you ask an AI a question, you're generally going to trust the AI. Let's take, for example, doctors. I've seen examples where you feed the same symptoms, the same reports to a doctor and an AI model, and the AI model does better more often. AI model is like 85% correct, and regular doctors were 80% correct. And if I remember right, Doctor plus AI was something like 81% or something. Like they didn't trust the AI when they should have. But that's not surprising to me at all. Right, if you ask, there's this idea of human calculator. If you ask a human to do mental arithmetic or plug it into a calculator, the calculator is a bajillion times better, but nobody died. Nobody lost their job. People just stopped wasting time on what became low value. And this is another really interesting point, by the way. The one thing I do believe will happen is that what we think is high value will change. So as soon as technology can do a thing, the value of that decreases. So if we're like, oh, I am important because I can, let's say, debug. Debug is a bad example because I don't think AI is going to be that good at that. So what is a good example of this? Let me take the example that, let me take this example. Here's one I actually do believe in. If I said, I think I'm a great developer because I can take a Figma design given to me from the design team, and I know all the latest greatest CSS tricks. I know this design system in and out. I know all the best coding practices. I will organize this into beautiful, well-structured files. I will use the best, most performant CSS. I will use the design system and components correctly, accessible, etc. And that's what makes me a good developer. My belief is AI will do that, 100%, no problem. And so, but I think what will happen, this always happens, is we're just going to stop valuing those things. We're just going to say those things aren't high value. As soon as a calculator can beat a human at arithmetic, we don't see arithmetic as super valuable because it's not. It's sort of commoditized by the technology. The technology can do it faster and cheaper, so the value of it drops. It's like anything, right? If you love, if you're paying a lot of money for compute and compute gets 1,000 times faster and cheaper, then that's the value of it. It's now a lot lower value, and that's great. You're going to want to use more of it. That's another common thing. There's a law for this. Hold on, let's look this up. What is the law where when something gets cheaper, people consume it more? What is it? It's like Euler's law. No, it's about, hold on. Okay, let's ask ChatGPT this. This was used about gas prices at one point. Let's go into this. No, it's not law of demand. No. It's cheaper, people consume it more. I mean, yes, I guess law of demand. No, there's a specific, God, I can't find it. There's a really good law for this that describes that if the more, like, for example, the more AI can help with coding, the more coders become valuable. And I firmly believe in that, like 100,000 million %. And the accounting example is a good one. There's counter examples, don't get me wrong. Digital photography made photographers less in demand. It's not that the sort of I can't even remember what they call it, where you had to like process film and actually do. God, I learned how to do this in high school. I don't remember the name for when you take on an analog camera, you take a photo and then you have to put paper in chemicals and then it develops the photo. Nobody does that anymore. But when everybody had a mobile phone with Instagram, and everybody's a photographer, and like that did hurt photographers for sure. Photography is not a big. Oh, is it Gauss law? Is a Fuzzy Bear right about this? No, it is not like a law of physics, and it's an economics law. Developing film. Thank you, Hang. Yes. Like people don't develop film anymore. You lower the barrier and then people can do it. But there's a lot that goes into being human. Like let's say on simple input output problems, the AI is just better. It's just smarter. It's an example of like what do you think this would look like? Like that's something I ask myself a lot. Like, what is the form factor of the super AI? And I do think we can really think about something like a C3PO. Let's say you just have an assistant. It's physical. It could follow you around everywhere. It can be with you. You can talk to it anytime. It could sit in with meetings. It's just your smart buddy. Actually, this is another kind of interesting example too, right? It's like that example of the two. There's so many examples of this. It's like Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. There's a million of these examples. You have the smart, nerdy guy. This is my guy with glasses. And then you've got Mr. or Mrs. Business or whatever. Sorry, nerdy guy or gal. You've got the smart one. Jevons paradox. Yes, thank you. Jevons. Okay, I need to get back to Jevons paradox in a moment. But this is a very common situation. The super, super smart one is not always making the best decisions. So you've got the talker. This person's a talker. They're not as smart. They probably weren't a frat in college. They probably worked in sales. Their job is talking. And they can navigate the social situation. And sometimes they're great at management. But they still ask the smart person, like, hey, can we build this? Another great example, oh my goodness, if you saw the BlackBerry movie, that movie was incredible. And that was a good example. There is the guy played by, Dennis from Always Sunny. But he's always consulting with the actual smart guy on the hard questions. But he's out. The smart guy was doing a terrible job selling the thing. BlackBerry was doomed, but they had good technology. But then we had, and they were not like, their company was flatlining. In fact, they sold a deal to, I think it was to the, oh God, who was it? It might have been the US government, that the yapper, we'll call him, thanks to Jean, the yapper immediately looked at that and said, like, they're not going to pay you for that. And of course, they're like, no, they'll pay us for it. No, they're not going to pay you. And turns out, no, they were not going to fucking pay them. And so Yapper comes in and he starts figuring out a better way to sell this thing. But he's not that smart. Like, he has to ask, like, hey, is this technology? Like, if we sold you this, could you make this happen? Blah, blah, blah. I do think that's kind of the example we're going to see, because AI doesn't have social skills. And it's like, well, maybe you can train it on that. Maybe. But, like, here's the problem. What do humans do? Let's think of one thing actually really quickly that's interesting. There's a few unique properties of humans that AI don't have today, and you can hypothesize how much AI will have. One unique property of humans is our brains change. So with an LLM, that thing is trained, and that thing's set in stone. It's in a box. The weights do not change the more you use it. It does not adapt itself. Now, what you can do is you can have sort of like long-term memory where you store things. ChatGPT experimented with this. I didn't find it really changed ChatGPT's quality, but it experimented with this. So it would store memories and they would retrieve them and try to use it to personalize responses in the future. Again, I never noticed this doing anything useful to me, but it's a cool idea. Devin claims to do this too. Devin, you can manually modify this too. It'll be like, oh, I feel like I learned a little factoid that's not documented. It'll save it. Like I told it to give my weather app iOS styling. That wasn't in the README or the description or anything, but it's like, oh, you want it to look like iOS, so it saved that into long-term memory. Great. So LLMs will have some version of this, and I do think one of the gating factors, so when you have these explosions in development and then a plateau, there's always some bottleneck, and these bottlenecks can be wildly more difficult than people anticipate. Honestly, something can be on a tear, and then the whole thing hits the brake because there's one bottleneck. The bottleneck might be compute. GPUs can't get fast enough. We can't get power cheap enough. That could be the bottleneck. It could be multiple bottlenecks, right? Another bottleneck might be memory and retrieval is just not efficient enough. Like semantic search with vectors. Thank you, somebody, for reminding me the word semantic. That's what I was looking for. It's good. It's not perfect. Maybe it's not perfect enough. Like if an AI wanted to answer emails on my behalf, it could probably look back on all my Slack conversations and emails and figure out what to write. But also it might not. Like when you do a retrieval, like I'll tell you, here's a simple example. GitHub Copilot's edits mode fucking sucks. I did a review of it. It's bad. It's so bad compared to there's so many good products. Lovable, Bolt, Cursor, Windsurf, all kinds. GitHub Copilot edits bad. And I was talking to the PM of that product, and I was like, after all the trial and error I went through, there's actually only one bad thing in my opinion. It's the search. it's feeding the wrong files in to the AI, and so the AI makes decisions off of the wrong things. And yeah, Keshav is like RAG is overrated. It kind of is. It isn't in some ways. Like, I want to get back to that because this whole idea of like self-learning, I think RAG sort of helps. Maybe there's a different model for this. But anyway, search quality makes a big difference. When you have more information and you need to know all the relevant things to a certain topic, if you cannot pull that from search, then you cannot be effective. Our brains are really good at retrieving information, but there's a caveat. And this one I think is interesting. So maybe what we'll do is we'll train smaller language models. What do people call these? Like SSMs? I don't even remember what that stands for. I saw the word SSM thrown around. Let's just pretend. SSM. Small something model. SLM? Small language model? I don't know. A small model. Let's say we make small models. And so one funny idea here is like, well, how do we make them smaller? I don't know if you've noticed, but ChatGPT is full of facts, right? It's got infinite facts in it. Like, what is the date of this war? So many things. But it remembers things wrong a lot too. But the wealth of factual information is like massive. Small stupid models. Yeah, we'll go with that. Small stupid models. So the wealth of factual information is super deep. What if we got rid of all that shit? What if we had a model that was small and all it could do is reason, and it was small enough that as it learned to do tasks, it could update its own weights and be better at it? That's more like our brains, right? Our brains don't store that many facts. So let's assume the future models don't store that many facts either. And instead, they think things through. And anytime they want to get a fact, they just look it up, right? And so that's like ChatGPT with search. Let's not memorize all these facts. Let's do a quick search and find the facts, the date of this war, the name of this person, and let's let the model only worry about thinking. And so let's say you have good retrieval, and let's say you have a small model that you can improve over time. There's still stuff missing. So we are a person, and we've got our smart C3PO. How do I draw through C3PO? Hold on. Let me get a reference real quick. Maybe I'll just make him gold. Okay, he's kind of got that like pill-shaped head. Let's go with that. So let's use this. He's got big eyes. This is our C3PO. Okay. This is our smart but dumb robot. There's so many smart but dumb robots in science fiction. In fact, most of the time they're smart but dumb robots. There's very rarely science fiction where the robots are smart but smart. In fact, the closest thing I can think of to smart but smart robots would be like Planet of the Apes, and we're not even... Sean's right, I could have just copied the image. Fine. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a screenshot. But this ruins my whole like aesthetic here. There we go. There's C3PO. Oh god. Oh god. Oh god. Hold on. Paste again. Okay. Here's C3PO. Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay. I don't know how to computer. We're gonna go with my beautiful ugly drawing. So the smart but smart example is like Planet of the Apes. They are just smarter than us in every way. I know there's others. I'm thinking of like Starcraft. No, were those robots like the Protoss or whatever? What's an example where the robots are just straight up smarter and better than us in every way? There's Her, where they just go fuck off and do their own thing. They're just gone. And it could be we don't have this science fiction because it's too scary to us. It's too ominous. We don't like the idea of it. It's not interesting. That's possible, but I do think that like you can make a movie about it, whatever you want, or a book. But if it's not plausible, then it just doesn't really work. And in most cases, we intuitively find it plausible that these things are smart but dumb. I mean, again, calculators, smart but dumb, so many things. Oh, Westworld's kind of a cool example. Westworld's one of the examples, or Ex Machina is kind of a cool example. Ex Machina is a cool, like, smart but smart example, actually, come to think of it. And that's maybe like realistic, but there's like a lot of stuff we have to solve until then. So right now, let's just say we get to reasoning and input output works. But again, let's say, for example, we are, let's say I want a robot to just do my job. So my job has a couple levels. I am a developer. I write code. So, can you come in and code for me? And I also manage people. I'm the CEO of a startup. So can it manage people? Whew, this one scared the shit out of me. And would people want to be managed by a robot? Or more likely, you have these subdivisions of your organization where it's just this robot managing robots. That maybe could happen to like limited use cases. I have not seen Megan crazy close to LLM plus robot. Interesting. Another, actually, a brief side note. There is this example in China where they're taking those like dog robots, the ones with the weird legs that are bent the wrong way but are really mobile, and they're just strapping fucking machine guns on the back. And they're just going to have robots that shoot things and people. And I saw this on like a news broadcast, and news broadcasters, the first thing they say is like, you turn the corner, see one of those, you're dead. It might be true. Like, honestly, it might be true. Like, you can just intuit that, like, a camera with radar, LiDAR, etc., can totally identify you and target you and shoot you fast, I'm sure. But it can reload fast. They're maneuverable. Yeah. Let's take the example of Waymo. Waymo's fucking interesting because they had that example. Now, Waymo's amazing. Waymo is without a doubt the future. But Waymo's fucking dumb. There's a lot of cases where there is a police car chasing a Waymo. Wee, 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 wee. And guess what? Waymo doesn't fucking pull over because it has no idea what the hell's going on. I'm surprised that Waymos are legal still because they don't get pulled over by a police car. You can't yell at a Waymo. Like, a Waymo is like, this happened, which scared the shit out of me one time. I was parked. So here's a road and here's the other cars. And I was parked here. And guess what a Waymo decides to do? It decides to park fucking right here and wait for someone. I can't get out. And guess what I can't do? I can't shout, yo, asshole, move your car. It's a fucking robot. He's not going to say shit. I can't get him to move. And it was like infuriating. And I was like trying to find, like, where's this person? Get in your Waymo. Like, I need to get out of this car. What I started doing, I started nudging my way into the Waymo, like I'm playing bumper cars. And eventually I think it got the gist and I was like, oh, I should move. This guy's crazy. But that was an awkward and ideal interaction. There's other examples too, but imagine, robot, let's say a Terminator thing comes at you and they're pointing their gun at you, they got their AK or whatever. And you're like, wait, I'm one of the good guys. And maybe it's true. The system detects you wrong. System's like, beep, 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 beep. This looks like a bad guy. Bow. Scary, right? But that's why we're going to have regulation around this. I don't think we're going to have RoboCops. I would be surprised if RoboCops happened in my lifetime in the next 50 years. It's just too scary to people. It's too dangerous, the fact that you can't talk to them. Now, maybe we get to a point where, like the Turing test has been, people keep redefining it. When is AI indistinguishable from humans? It's no longer just chatting because chatbots are good now. But like maybe we get to a point where robots, we just have so much trust in them that will allow it, but that seems far-fetched to me. Now moving forward, let's think about sort of our job, right? So let's take coding. Coding is rarely just reasoning about a few files in a code base. Coding, there's a lot of things to do, right? One of the biggest things is just making good decisions. Now, I've seen AI make some good default decisions. A nice UI, they've got the login form with the buttons and the da-da-da. That's pretty cool. But there's an interesting gap where the AI just doesn't know, quote unquote, how a user would interact with something. Now, you might be able to make like a chain of stuff, like, hey, let's have the AI generate, a user flow, let's say, a few pages in a sequence. And then we're going to pass that to like user testing and give it user feedback and back. This is a funny situation people talk about sometimes, where this is an example of us becoming the cattle, so to speak. So right now, if you think of like Mechanical Turk or something, the bottleneck in a lot of cases is the AI doing the work or whatever. But let's imagine for a second that the actual code is the AI. AI does all the coding. And we just have to provide the human parts. The human parts is user testing. So we are just user testers. We are kind of like QA testers. And that's it. The AI is the engineers and the humans are the QA testers. I don't actually believe this will happen, but it's hypothetical, right? But if you really think about where the bottlenecks are, the AI has to make products for humans. But let's take it further. The interesting thing about the wild robot is the fact that the robot lands on this island, big island, a lot bigger than I'm making it look. That's a tree, by the way. So you got this robot lands here. And the first thing it says is, what is my task, right? Because we're obviously going to create robots and AI to do work for people, right? So I'm a person, I have short, medium, and long-term goals. I have experience. I know nuanced dynamics between people, between code bases, between best practices, blah, 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 blah. And the AI at first will be trained, what is my task? And so, yeah, you just feed them a task. That's how it works now too, with Cursor, with Copilot, with Devin, with whatever. Here's my task. Give me food and fire. Yeah, and they're probably great at that. The wild robot's a good example of that. They could absolutely make fire. They could absolutely go hunt some food. Now, they have some rules, actually. One thing is they're not allowed to kill stuff. So, they might not be able to obey certain commands if they have to be programmed to not allow that. And we should assume that too, right? Robots will be programmed not to kill people and blah, blah, blah. Will people hack them and modify them? We'll see. Usually as like the hackers get smarter, the countermeasures get smarter. It's a cat and mouse game. People play these extremes. They say like, oh, robots for evil. And it's like, okay, well, if they're smart evil, there's going to be smart good. And it just kind of goes in circles forever. Not that one side doesn't win for long extents as well. But then it's like, well, okay, if AI is just task-based, then they can't replace my job. But what if you gave it long-term goals? And this is where I think things get interesting. So let's say the long-term goal of this AI was make money, right? Let's go back to the AutoGPT example. Make as much money as you possibly can. And so it's got a long-term goal. This is more like a human, right? What's interesting about humans is, you're born into the world. You're a little baby. Here's your nestled little baby stuff. You're a little baby. And then you're born into a society, right? If there wasn't a society, it'd be hunter-gatherer. So either you're born a long, long time ago, and you need to go hunt, spear your animals, or gather your fruits and vegetables and stuff. That's tedious, right? Eating not super delicious food, really a lot of work for I'd call it low quality of food, just in terms of like our desire to eat it, our joy of having a raw elk or whatever, a rabbit. Or you could be born into a society, which all of us are, which the society takes care of these basic needs. You can get good food affordably in most of the world, as long as you work. You got to make money. So that's what you're born to do. You got to make money. The more money you make, the more good food and other stuff you enjoy you can have. So there will be a lot of inconveniences in this process of getting food. You will have to, I live in a tiny shoebox apartment in San Francisco. I'm a startup founder. Don't pay myself a ton. Most startup founders don't. If I had a bunch more money, I would get more space. Like right now, I can touch my little area I work in. I can touch all four walls with my hands right now. I don't have like a window. Like I can't see the outside. I would be happier marginally, but I wouldn't mind if I had more space. So it's like I can do more high value work that makes me more money, and I can have these sort of like pleasures. It's not really a closet, it's like a cubicle. I call it that. I kind of subdivided the bedroom to give me this kind of working area because it's a 1-bedroom apartment. Anyway, so if I do more high value work, I get more money and I could get more space. So I would love to have like an office, some layout where I had like an office where I've got like a desk and I've got like a window. My God, that would be a dream. It's not my highest priority in life at all. That'd be nice. And so you could say, if you were to overly and almost sociopathically distill down what motivates a human, if you make a robot called human and you want it to act just like a human, what is the goal? The goal is sort of make money. Now, realistically, I think make money is the simplest proxy for what we actually care about. What we actually care about is a little bit hard to perfectly define, right? We get dopamine and serotonin, and even these are wildly, overly simplified models. When people say like, your life is dopamine, it's like, not really. It's like way more nuanced. I majored in neuroscience and I dropped out. But technically it was cognitive science. It's a mix of neuroscience, computer science, blah, 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 whatever. It's sort of an AI-ish major. So you want to get these happy chemicals. What makes you happy? Well, you do want to eat. You do want to socialize. I'm an introvert, so to a limited degree, I want to socialize. You probably want a romantic partner. Usually like stimulation, so you might like video games, right? What defines sort of happiness and joy for the average person will change, right? I like video games. I like having space. I like having downtime. I like TikTok. I like to watch YouTube videos. So you like to do this stuff. Why do we like this stuff? I don't fucking know. Nobody fucking knows. Biologically, we evolved this way, right? We are in the universe. We are, in a bunch of planets. We spawned out of nothing. We were first a little bacteria that made large organizations that can eat other organizations. We really only care about one thing ultimately, which is survival. And so maybe that's the lowest common denominator. Survive, you got to eat. But in doing so, because we're not super simplistic creatures, or at least our little, pebble minds can't understand ourselves fully, we just know there's a lot of like stuff we like to do when we're not solely having to survive. So that's what motivates us. So let's say you want to make an AI that's as good as a human. So the AI has a long-term goal. And we're just going to say, let's just assume for a minute that money is one of the simplest single units to define what humans care about. Meaning, if humans want something, if I want this, then somebody's going to charge me money. If I have more money, I can get more of what I want. Sort of. Like, there's a lot of caveats to that. I'm not a big believer in money as a source of happiness, to be clear. That's why I live in a small space and work on startups and don't get paid much more money somewhere else. I like to work on what I'm passionate about. Why am I passionate about it? I don't fucking know. I just think it's cool. I don't really question it much further than that. As long as I'm not doing harm to the world, I'm happy about having some kind of impact that I feel is positive. So, but let's just say in general, things that people want cost money. Money is a limiting factor, so it's good there. So robots, your long-term goal is make money. What does a robot need to do to make money? So the first thing you could say is like, okay, I'm just going to throw a program at the stock market, right? Literally, it's simple input-outputs. There's data in, you take a single action, buy or sell, and then you get data back out, and then you repeat. There is, without a doubt, no good single computer trader out there. Now, there are businesses that have small groups of people who are super smart that write sophisticated programs that suggest trades and might automatically make certain trades. They are heavily supervised, is your eyeballs. You're heavily watching everything it's doing, and it's making suggestions, you're confirming them, but there's no world where like any computer software is just making money. And there's kind of a reason for that. What's interesting about stock markets is the prices are always changing, whatever. But as soon as somebody games the system, high frequency trading, they find some reproducible something, some people will just trade what Nancy Pelosi trades. As soon as everybody starts doing something, it stops working. That's where you have to get creative again and go back to the drawing board. And maybe AI can be creative faster. And maybe there is a world where the stock market is just one day, just AI competing with AI. Maybe that's what it is today. Maybe today the world's AI all the way down. We just don't know it yet. But I'm doubtful of that. Because usually the humans need for creativity. And yes, OpenAI says the creativity will come, but like that's theoretical at this point. It could be next year. It could be 10 years. It could be 100 years. It could be literally never. Because to be sort of like a human who can do things, you've got experiences, you've got decisions that you make. You have, if I just wanted to, as a basic example, throw an AI at my email and say, here's my code. That's actually a fun example. Here's my code. Here's my Slack. Here's my email. Go. I would be super, super surprised if we can find anything really useful anywhere even remotely soon. And there's like a few reasons for that. Let me go into them. I actually wrote some notes because thinking about this kind of on my off time. I think, let's say that they are ridiculously smart. And let's say, oops, I'm popping windows I don't want to pop. And let's say we cross all the boxes, right? They are super smart. They have amazing memory and retrieval. They can self-update. You can say like, when the AI can program updates to the AI, then the world will accelerate at a pace. But no, there's still going to be bottlenecks. Compute is still going to be a bottleneck. There's going to be power. There's going to be like, you literally have to manufacture hardware. Like there's going to be bottlenecks. You might have a software explosion and then you hit some new bottleneck, right? Maybe the physical form factor of the AI robots needs to change. It's going to take time. Literally just physics is always a limiting factor. But when we talk about self-updating, I actually mean like human self-update. We're self-updating software. We have experiences and the neural network itself changes. Let's say AI can do that too. Let's say we actually get to an ex machina world, or her. I mean, there's a few different examples here too. So ex machina is an interesting example of the AI fucking hates us. I'm oversimplifying. AI smarter than us and doesn't like us. and because we treat the AI like shit. And there could be part of human nature that's the case. There is a funny example. This was also an All In podcast. I sort of don't recommend that podcast, but it's interesting sometimes. Where I guess a bunch of rich people, investors, went to some gathering, and there was some like humanoid robot there that you could interact with. And what do people start doing? They start like kicking and punching it. We have this like urge, or they were talking about like humans having this urge to just like destroy things, and we're not allowed to do it on living things, but on non-living things, we're like, fuck yeah. Now, obviously, if I bet you any AI, if it actually like made it look like we were causing it pain, we would feel bad and we would stop doing that. And so I don't think that that would probably last. But there's a certain degree of like humans have sort of like conquered and abused like every other living organism for their own gains. But what happens when the living organism is smaller, not smarter? Now, again, we have to program these things to care about certain things. So there's always going to be things like regulation. There's going to be regulation that says, robots can't, blah, blah, blah. They're going to have, like you've seen in all kinds of examples. Westworld is one. There's a million where, like, there's some things they're just not allowed to do. They just doesn't compute. Now, Westworld's another funny example, too. And there's been other these, too. Like, well, what if they start modifying each other, right? The robot opens up the, chest of another robot and starts making modifications. Let's delete that, let's override this software. Let's delete this, and that's sort of a chicken and egg thing too, obviously. Jean asks about programming surviving versus self-preservation. What do you think is the difference between surviving and self-preservation? That feels the same to me, but maybe I'm just mincing words there. Hang says, AI showing pain or discomfort isn't going to stop people from abusing it. I think it would stop some people. It would stop me, I feel like, and most people I know. But yes, I totally agree. There's a whole group of people who will want to abuse the thing more. Who I want to say they're a little sick in the head, but maybe that's a lot of people. I don't know. I mean, people play video games where you shoot people, and the people certainly go when they die, but not usually like innocent people. So I think we would have robots that kind of, for their own self-preservation, they would want to adapt to, be the version of, help me, you don't want to attack something that seems helpless. Obviously not the ones that have a machine gun strapped to their backs. But anyway, where was I going with this? There's still a lot of problems to solve. Any one of these problems, let's go back up a little bit. Any one of these problems could take a long time. Making them smart enough, make them have enough memory. You got to make them fast enough. O3 taking, can't remember, at least $20 per ARC task. And remember, ARC tasks are things that humans can answer pretty instantly within a minute or two. And for $20 per task, these things need to be smarter, faster, cheaper. They need to have memory. They need to be able to self-update to some degree. The memory and retrieval probably needs to work better than things do today. And maybe we can solve these one by one. Then you have to get around, again, we talked about like government regulation. Maybe it's like, I know some people have talked about creating new super societies that, we're going to let science go rapid, super fast. Or maybe one thing people are really interested in is like, what if the AI could make discoveries? AI can improve biology or physics. Now, what do you have to do these things? Well, you need to have an idea, you need to test it, and you need to repeat, right? And so the testing, the interacting with the physical world is always going to be the bottleneck, right? It takes time to run a clinical trial. Super example, a lot of time. And you just don't know things. I'm personally a believer that, it's cool that, well, just in general, right? Let's step back. I'm a believer that thinking about things is not nearly as impactful as doing them. It's a vague statement. But generally when building software, I'm a massive believer in build the tiniest thing. I know this word is overused, but the idea of an MVP. And I think most people's idea of an MVP and mine are pretty different. There are other people who agree with me, don't get me wrong. I'm not like an N=1 on this. But like, I've worked at a lot of companies where the MVP was fucking complicated. No, I mean like really stupid small. Truly the tiniest thing you can get in front of a user. So the user can basically tell you, this is shit. You want that. You want there to be negative feedback as much as possible. And you might do this in sort of a private mechanism and repeat and keep iterating. Take the feedback, iterate, get feedback. And so in a world where let's say AI does all this, then we're sort of just feedback constrained. Now, in software, if it's a product for users, then user feedback is the bottleneck. Does it do what they're expecting? Can it take in the feedback and make something better? Now, with physics, or let's say biology or chemistry, etc., like let's say you're looking for a new medication, then your test here is probably going to be like a clinical trial. So it's going to be super slow. But this idea of iteration, I believe much more than thinking. So some companies love to plan. They love to come up with a perfect plan. Here's our flawless plan, and we're going to have 1 meeting, 2 meetings, 3 meetings, 4 meetings. We're going to nitpick this plan. In my experience, the more you get more people critiquing a plan, the more the plan gets worse. Somebody had an idea. I'm not going to say the first person was some genius or something, but somebody identified a problem, and they probably identified it right there, face to face with the raw information. A user or a set of users running into a problem they could see firsthand. There's a lot of nuance to this too. There's a lot of nuance to observing user problems and finding clever solutions. But ignoring that for a second, somebody identified a problem. So you have version 1 that's like, hey, I see a problem and maybe I'm a developer and I might know a hack that could get us to some solid step towards a solution that we can test on a user. But in my experience, a lot of larger companies don't like that. They want to keep talking. And as they talk, they start revising. You get this design by committee, or you kind of trend towards this lowest common denominator, or you start focusing on avoiding all possible risks. And in doing that, you lose track of what a good solution even looks like. Then you end up with something pretty crappy. And you end up with that over the course of 3 months or something. And then it's complicated too. So after maybe say a month of planning deliberation, now you've got this 3-month waterfall of building, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. So even if we made the best possible reasoning model, I don't think reasoning is the limiting factor in most work. I think that there's a couple things here. One is sort of the iteration and evaluation, so getting that feedback and processing it. And again, I'll use feedback broadly. The feedback could be the clinical trial, it could be the user survey, it could be what the AI is good-ish at is super clear feedback, like the test didn't pass. This test failed this condition. This was the expected output, and this was the given results. So that's great. I'm going to assume it's going to get better at that. But here's another crazy one. It takes a lot of creativity to figure out a good solution to users' problems. And there are cases in software where you do have to make big bets. I'll take an example of Builder as a platform. The company I run is started as what we called a visual CMS. So the specific problem we were solving was I've got, like, let's say in e-commerce, you've got this e-commerce site. You've got all these pages, all these like marketing pages. You probably have some core pages like the product search results and the product detail page. Those are pretty complex. You've got them managed tightly in code. You've got a million marketing pages. You've got the home page. You've got all these like sponsor or something pages. And those are a pain for developers to keep up with because marketing is always changing their mind. Our marketing is always running a new A/B test. There's a million things they got to do on these pages. And so the idea of the visual CMS was like, well, with modern frameworks like React, what if we made it so there was just some React component? We called this the Builder component, one word. And then there was an API call and you pass in some data and basically you get this drag and drop editor. So this came from when our marketing team kept wanting to use Webflow because they could churn out pages in Webflow way faster than they could using developer tickets, right? In one world, they can just drag and drop and make something in Webflow. In the other world, they write a developer ticket and wait like 3 months. And half the time, developers say, like, sorry, there's no time for that. They just want something like Webflow. Now, the problem with Webflow is it didn't hook into your app. We had an Angular app. It wasn't going to change. And so we just needed a drag and drop you can connect. So I made this SDK and this API and this visual editor that was like, hey, now, like if you go to, it sucks. Our really big customers I can't name publicly because they're super secretive. Not secretive, they don't. But Fabletics is an example. Go like fabletics.com or whatever. This is all just drag and drop by the marketing team. All this stuff that you see. Go to, I want to show you the really big ones, but I can't because they're super private about their brands. Everlane, right? All this stuff just dragged and dropped. Super cool. And it's using their React components. Like this is like their React carousel, but they're drag and dropping in Builder. Super cool stuff. So that was the product. Product was that. Plug it in, drag and drop, publish, headless CMS, but with visual editing and structured data too. That was really cool. Now the thing is, headless CMSs take a lot of buy-in to adopt. So you need an engineering team and a marketing team to both agree, we want to try this product, we're going to integrate the product, and then we're going to test it in production or a staging environment. If we like it, we'll unroll it further. That takes a lot of work. And in order to grow, we're a venture-backed company, so we need to grow not like super slow. We need to grow as fast as possible. And people were signing up for Builder, and they're like, this is interesting, but like, crap, I can't just sort of like hook this up to my production site. I'm going to need to get my engineering team to like approve this, and marketing team, and da-da-da. What you'd want to do is you'd want to catch people at the time. We learned this through trial and error. They were doing like a replatform. That would be the time to be like, hey, use another CMS. But how do you catch people replatforming? We thought investing in a framework called Quick. We were the original creators of Quick. Like, hey, let's make a lighter, better, faster React. People use that. They might want to use us if they have the CMS that they're building with that. We think it can make the web better. And overall, there were other good projects happening at the same time too. React was getting better with React Server Components. Astra was coming out, which was amazing in so many ways. And this was taking a ton of resources from us. So we just didn't have capacity to invest in as a company. It wasn't having a clear ROI. So we essentially gave the Quick project to the Quick community. We had grown contributors. They were amazing. We said, hey, you can own this. This is yours. We're basically just handing it to you. We're having no tie to this. Just call us a sponsor, on the homepage, and we're good. And the headless CMS, I think Quick is cool. I think Quick is super cool. And people use it, and it's growing. But these were all interesting learnings. One day, though, we kind of had this idea, which is like, hey, most of the stuff that ends up on websites of our customers, they start in Figma. But a design tool like Figma does not translate directly to code very well. And Builder, the SDKs, the CMS, is basically you have to take something from design, which is sort of like absolute position stuff, to code, which is all responsive, structured, uses components, like design tokens, like CSS variables or whatever you use. There's a translation process. So people would manually, they would, use their eyes, and they would just look at Figma, boop, 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 and then they would have to drag and drop in Builder to reproduce. And one thing you learn is just by making something visual doesn't make it intuitive. Like, you make it easier. You don't have to learn coding syntax. But even just like responsive design, things like flexbox and responsiveness, is really, really confusing to people who are not developers. I should have known. I didn't realize that. So we tested that and discovered that, and like, oops, that's still hard. This is not like you just make a visual and it's easy now. But we're like, wait, all this stuff is starting in Figma, the big F. Is that a Figma logo? That's kind of what the Figma logo looks like. Everything's starting in Figma. Like, what if we just translated Figma to Builder, which is really just code? It's just like an abstract coding representation. Now, I ran some experiments for some time and found that's way harder to do than you would think. You can't just pass that to an LLM. We tried. Some people offer that. Like, if you go to V0, there's an import from Figma button, but the results are bad because it's using LLM vision. That's one hack you could do. You could send a screenshot, but LLM vision is not accurate. The colors will be wrong. The layout's wrong. Every detail's wrong. It'll make you something that sort of resembles the design, but it's not correct. The whole point of Figma is like pixel perfection. You can even set responsiveness. You can use components. You can use exact images. It'll basically like delete all the images like they never happened. Anyway, you could do the other way, which is you manually try and turn something absolute to responsive. So that is, on one side, you have the LLM vision. That's what V0 does. It's wildly inaccurate to a problematic degree. Now, if inaccurate's fine, like it's a hobby project and you just found some open source design, that's fine. But if you're like a real company that actually put time into your design, you want to code it correctly, it's not fine at all. And there's no way to fix it besides just rewrite, like literally recode the whole thing and do the conversion work. On the other end is you can import it all direct from Figma, which means absolute positions. So the direct from Figma way is something, there's this tool called like Anima that does, where if you use auto layout in detail, it'll sort of make things responsive, but really like the converting a design that's like absolutely positioned, you've got like a rectangle here and text and a button, to responsive, kind of knowing like, oh, this should be like this should be 2 columns. Maybe we're going to use Flexbox or CSS Grid. This, which actually might have been made up of lots of vectors, should actually be squashed into one image. There should be one image, so we kind of export it as such. This is wildly complicated. And so what we ended up doing is we ended up training our own model for this. LLM couldn't do it. Heuristics couldn't do it. A self-trained model did it really well. There's still room to improve. There's still tons of ways to make this better. There's tons of cases that don't come in as well as you wish it did. But that's sort of the gist. Now, we had to invest in train our own model. And we had to invest in code generation. Now, the nice thing is LLMs help with code generation. We have this open source project called Mitosis that does what we call like a baseline code generation. It can make basic React code or whatever. It supports a lot of frameworks and libraries. And then the LLM makes that code higher quality. It can turn it into multiple files, give things good names, good class names, all this stuff, nice props, multiple components, really, really cool stuff. So that was cool. That was really cool. But where I'm going with this is this was a huge bet. This was like this may or may not work. There was no way to know if this would work. I made the decision at one point to say, we're just going to go for this crazy thing. This whole idea of like, I want to import from Figma direct into Builder well, and I want Builder to not only output over an API, but direct to code. Because direct to code, if you take a Figma design on one side, put Figma here, blah, 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 looks a little bit like a butt. It's not intentional. Figma there, and code out the other side. That's super easy to adopt. We have this cool, what we call visual development platform. And if any developer can just convert a design to code using AI, they could see value immediately. You don't have to convince 10 teams and have to find you when you're doing a replatform. Nobody wants to replatform when they're not trying to. Don't have to do any of that shit. Don't have to describe, oh, this is different than other headless CMSs. Those arguments can be very circular. And every headless CMS tries to market itself like it has all the things the others have, whether it's true or not. Now, let's reverse engineer this and say, like, okay, could an AI have figured that out? Or like, what would an AI need to be able to figure that out? A lot of things, honestly. Like an AI needs to be aware of the current like dev ecosystem, right? What is going on? You know, what is going on with React and components? What is going on with our product? What is the feedback? And yes, you can maybe ingest all the stuff. So let's say the AI, you ingest all of, I'm just going to say the Twitterverse. I don't like calling it an X. And then let's say it can ingest all the product feedback. Let's say it could listen in on all conversations, right? So we've got these sort of like our internal employees who know a lot of the stuff, and it's hearing all the convos. It's absorbing all the stuff. Twitter feedback conversations. It's an expert at technology, and it can go to people and ask them, and it can be smart enough to know, hey, can you prototype this thing? All this different stuff. And then maybe say like, okay, yes. And it can sort of do the business analysis on if we think this is the right direction, when can we execute it by, and is it worth all the different trade-offs? And can make the decision, say, yes, we're going to pursue this, and then check in on it and make sure it's going well, etc. It's a big maybe. Like maybe the AI could do all those things. Will it happen soon? I don't know. A lot of this is because of the fact that we talked about that average principle. AI is trained on the average of the internet, the average code, the average writing. The average writing is bad. The average marketing is bad because the average marketing 2 years ago is not good marketing today. Content generation. AI is bad at content generation. There are no good AI generated content out there, in my experience, in my opinion, because what it's trained on, what's seeing a year or two ago is just not popular today. Now you could say, well, we've got like the ARC test saying that the AI can generalize. So the AI can see what's popular this month and generalize that to its niche. Maybe. I think there would be steps here. Like if we ever do get there, step one would be like just getting to the point where the AI can suggest something good. And you go, oh, that's pretty good. And I'll ship that. No, we're not even close to that. Believe me. After that, and I think there's steps of like, hey, you know, a suggestion where like maybe 1 out of 10 is a good idea. Oops, I'm off screen. 1 out of 10 is a good idea. After that, maybe we get, you know, maybe it's got a 50% success rate. It can suggest 50% time good. Let's say 90%. Let's say most of the time it does a good job. And say all the way at the top here is full on auto mode. It can just crank out content. Maybe one day your TikTok feed is just AI competing with other AI. What would happen in that world? In that world, I mean, think about it. It's a lot like people are saying will happen with gaming, right? Games will be personalized, content will be personalized. One thing that could happen is you could get a massive explosion in long tail. So basically, when AI is competing with other AI, what the AI can do is it's probably less resource constrained on time as an abstract concept in some ways. So you're going to open your TikTok feed and you're going to see stuff super personalized to you. Because of the fact that there's so many AIs making so many things, they can cover so many niches more effectively. But here's the funny thing. You know how like the basic product is going to be the like manufactured product, right? The one where everybody has the same thing or whatever. And then there's a premium on handmade, right? You go to the boutique shop and it's advertising handmade. We love handmade. We love interacting with people. I love searching Reddit because I just want a fucking human to tell me something. I want to trust its authenticity. Reddit is pretty good at combating bots. And so a lot of times, like when I was traveling across Japan the last couple of weeks, I would check ChatGPT and I'd be like, you know what? This is probably fucking garbage. Like I would ask ChatGPT, what ramen, where should I get ramen in Shinjuku, in Tokyo? And what's it going to do? Well, if you don't use search, it's going to give something really garbage. If you get search, it's going to basically regurgitate TripAdvisor. What does TripAdvisor have? All the fucking tourist traps. The ChatGPT is going to give you a list of tourist traps. Here's the places popular with tourists. I want the locals. So what did I do? I go to Reddit. I wanted a handwritten, bespoke fucking answer that is voted by other humans too. So I wanted the person who lives in Japan who says, these are the best 3 spots in Shinjuku. And I want other people to reply, yes, these 3 are really good. And that has extremely high value. And that's where I think we're going to see a premium on just humans. I want to call a place and talk to a human. And I will put really high value on that in a lot of cases. I want code written by a human, where a human verified, like, yes, I am a human that uses products like this. I have feelings like you have around what a good product experience is like. And I have reviewed this product, this code, and put my stamp on it and said, yes, this is good for humans. This is human certified. I really do believe that the volume from AI stuff will go up immensely. In fact, it already has. The web, there's this whole dead web hypothesis. It's so fucking stupid in my opinion. Because just the name implies that the internet is mostly AI. And by volume, it's probably correct. As in, there's an insane amount of AI generated content on the internet. Insane. But you don't see it because it's not fucking good. We even experimented with that. We have a blog. It's popular. We experimented with different levels of AI's involvement in the writing process. And guess what happened? The more the AI helped, and we built our own tool, we used sophisticated prompt engineering, we did all kinds of stuff. Yeah, terrible, just terrible with SEO. The more AI was involved, the more our blog content did terribly. The less AI was involved, the more the content did well. With SEO, because remember SEO, I'm talking SEO, traffic visits. SEO looks at what do people actually read and engage with, right? Google's looking at, did you click a link and not come back to Google? If a user clicks a link, reads and says, this is AI slop, and comes back to Google, Google starts deranking you. If a user lands on there and never goes back to Google because they found their answer, said, hey, this is good, this is engaging, this answers my question, a human wrote this to me, another human, this is great. I don't think AI will ever be a better human. There's just no way. You know what I mean? It will get better and better at faking being a human. But remember, there's this thing called the uncanny valley where you get close but not quite there and actually you hate it. And I'll show you some examples, right? We can just go uncanny valley. Oh my God. Yeah, some of these are scary. Yeah, so this is from the Polar Express. Some CGI fits in the uncanny valley. Robotics. This would probably be better off as a video. Oh my God, some dolls. Yeah, it's like if you make dolls or cartoons too realistic. The movie Cats was a funny one where they made the cats too human realistic and it just makes us extremely uncomfortable. And so there's a high value on humans. And that's the funny irony. Like the more we have AI, the more humans become valuable. We want a human interaction. We want a human generated product because we're just ingesting humans. If you go back to like, what is the meaning of life? The meaning of life is do the things that makes your brain happy. What makes your brain happy is the stuff that evolution decided over time would increase your chances of survival, right? I like to play video games. I think video games more or less simulates the types of high engagement activity that maybe made you a good hunter in the past or whatever, stuff like that. I find this fun. I find video games made by humans to be fun. If you look at the best TV videos, movies, they are not the statistical average of everything else on the internet. They are surprising. You know, you watch Squid Game season 1, that thing was fucking surprising on so many levels. That's why people liked it. And so this idea of AI is going to be the statistical average, it's always just reflective of its training data. The some things when they go to the average is just bad, and it is really cool. AI can make you, if you have 1% or less coding skills and we bring you to 50%, that's amazing. But you know the amount of people I've told to just try Bolt or Cursor for their use case and came back to me and said that didn't work at all. It's like 99%. It's the vast majority. I stopped recommending it. I just see people on Twitter who are like, wow, I mentioned this before, I fired my dev team because it's so good. That's what gets likes. The amount of people who on Twitter say like, hey, I couldn't get this to work is vast. And what that has to do with is the tool can only handle what the average developer, single developer under a limited set of constraints and set of capabilities can do. And the problem is, it's not good today. These products aren't good at like talking to you and being like, oh, this is not a good use case that I'd be good at. They might improve there. They might get better at being upfront about like, oh, I can't do that, but I can make a to-do app. And they can make cool apps. They can make unique novel games. There's a lot of cool stuff the AI can do, but it's hard when you just want to talk to a human. If you went to a dev and said, hey, I want a Facebook clone, the dev would be like, I could do that, but it's not going to really be a Facebook clone. AI won't do that, right? No product would be successful saying that. It's going to try, and it's going to get, I've talked about this on other videos, but you're going to hit that plateau of death. By the way, I used to talk about the what do they call it? What did I call it? The pit of death, where you keep prompting, you keep making progress, and everything kind of face plants. This shit still happens. Like you can get into an error that's really hard to get out of, and reverting even becomes challenging for whatever variety of reasons. But what you'll always hit is this plateau of death. You'll get a Facebook clone that kind of looks like Facebook and kind of acts like Facebook, and then you're like, a simple example, you'll be like, oh, I want the photos to automatically identify faces. You know, like good fucking luck, of the people, you know, in my friends list, you know, whatever. If there's not an off-the-shelf model for it, you're not going to do it. A human, of course, can say, well, that's, I don't know, that's going to happen in a reasonable time frame. But as we know, what we will obviously do is we will use the AI to help us humans, right? So this is a great example. I know there's facial detection models. I don't know what's a good one. I don't know necessarily how to integrate one because I haven't done it before. That's the type of thing I'm going to ask AI to do. I'm going to use my human judgment to be like, I don't know. Let's see. Let's try it. It might hook it up. I'll test it out. That's fantastic. So helping humans, the C3PO model again, helping humans do human stuff will undoubtedly happen. Now, scientific breakthroughs, media, etc., the 50% average, maybe it's 50% good reasoning, that I don't think is going to solve like the majority of what people need. So I think what we'll see is we'll see a leveling to the median, right? So right now, humans have a variety of skills. Humans might spike in this skill, but be bad at these, right? With AI, suddenly everyone will be 50% good at everything. But what's going to happen when everyone's 50% good at everything? Well, that becomes the new denominator. So you're back to the same fucking situation again, where you're like, okay, what you used to define as medium now just becomes bad, right? Bad. 50% bad. Or like back to that idea of the dead internet theory, most content is AI generated on the internet. Most content you're reading is not, because you're reading the human stuff. You're reading the stuff that's surprising, interesting, that speaks in the tone of voice that you expect. And this bar will keep moving forever. It's a cat and mouse game forever. We will keep needing to get one level ahead of the AI. The AI is going to get one step better, and then we're going to need to get one step better. And it'll keep going, but the reality is we use the AI to do our next thing. So as the AI gets better, we use that and build on top of it. In my opinion, we will forever focus on that last percent. So the last mile is all that ever matters in a lot of cases, right? There's a million products, but everyone, in a lot of cases, you know, you've got all these different products that are this amount good, but everybody wants to use the product that is just 1% better, right? I think that ChatGPT is a few percent better than Claude, the chat interface. So I use it. And I think Claude Sonnet is reasonable percent better than 4.0. So I use Claude Sonnet. And so Claude Sonnet makes all the money. If you look at, I did a video on this too, if you look at the ratio of money that OpenAI makes their ChatGPT product versus API, it's like roughly like 80%, 20%. And Claude is the opposite. Claude makes 80% of their money from the API, 20% from the chat. And it's a simple example. ChatGPT is chat better, so all the money goes there. When it's the best one, everybody uses that one. It's not like you're 5% better, so you win 5% more. No, it's you're 5% better, you win 100% more. All the users use your product. That's just how a lot of product and markets work. Not all, but many, especially many that are so easy to adopt. If you can just jump into a new chat assistant and pick up like nothing ever happens, there's no switching cost, then everyone will use you. And that's what we talked about before, this whole like risk of the cost drives down to zero. Or as the cost drives towards zero, OpenAI could be screwed, because if people can have as good of a product at a lower cost, it's faster, cheaper, etc. Especially on the API side, I think that is, how fast can you type? Oh, I was talking to somebody else in the chat. I think that is something that's like a real risk. Now, Claude overall makes a lot less money than OpenAI, so I do want to be clear about that. We're just talking about ratios here. Someone called that on a video as misleading. It's like, oh crap, it wasn't meant to be. It's just talking about ratios. So this is the better API. A lot of people flock to that. And this is a better chatbot. A lot of people flock to that. And so when we're talking about being 10% better, 10% above average, it's always going to be closing, I would call it the human gap. Anything we can automate becomes the like the iceberg under the water. Nobody gives a shit about. It's table stakes. It's the standard every product has. If you can automate it, if AI can do it, we're all using the same fucking models. If AI can do it for me, it can do it for everybody. The thing that gives any business, any person value is the 10% better you can do over the top. And I think that's all that matters. And I think the reality of where we're going with all this AI world is that this will constantly be shifting. What is the part that we can automate will shift. So Physical came out, creating and maintaining a spreadsheet is not a high value skill. It was, and then it wasn't, seemingly overnight. And that's just the reality. It's just not anymore. Calculators came out, and mental arithmetic is just not a valuable skill anymore. Yes, there are math competitions. I don't care about them. A lot of people don't care about them. They exist, but doesn't mean that they're valuable, and it's just not a high value skill people have. That's why, I remember back in the day, it was like unheard of, like, oh, you can't take a math test with a calculator. When the math gets sufficiently advanced, you certainly can. And that enables us to teach more advanced math topics when you're not focused on the underlying calculations so much. All you can do is, it allows you to focus on the higher level theorizing. And if AI can do some portion of the higher level theorizing, you can keep moving up higher and higher in abstraction while still being grounded. You're not like floating up in the clouds with these weird ideas that like are so removed from base reality, it's pointless. You instead can actually reason at a higher level and be working with automation, AI, etc. And I think that's really exciting. And I think we will move up the value chain. And one thing I believe strongly is if you have technical skills, you're way more effective. A dumb basic example of this is a product manager who works on, say, like a technical product, anything that involves, like, I want to say non-trivial code. As an example, all the PMs we hire at Builder, we try and make sure they have an engineering background. Why? Because we build a product for engineers. A lot of it is code generation, code ingestion, looking at design, this and that. You might say you don't need to engineer to be a PM. In our case, we found much better success with PMs who have engineering skills than those who don't. It doesn't mean you can't be a great PM, but the odds of success were higher when you have the engineering skills. So if you're working on a foundational technology, a technology that is novel, there's heavy R&D, whatever, and you're operating at this higher level abstraction, you're not writing code, but you know the code. It doesn't have to be all the way down, right? It doesn't have to be down to binary. I don't have a computer science degree. I code a lot. I code cool stuff. I built cool projects and products and companies and whatever with code that I wrote myself. I have no CS degree. I have no idea how binary works. I cannot even count in binary. I cannot tell you how, I know, like, I went to UC Berkeley 2 years, I dropped out, but I know they teach you how, like, electronic, like, circuit boards or whatever. I don't know how any of this shit works, man. I don't know any of this stuff. But yeah, just like Justin says, PMs generally are easier to work with if they have engineering skills. You can talk at a deeper level. It's nice. Like another common example is CEOs of technology companies frequently have engineering backgrounds. Satya Nadella. There's a million examples, but let's just take Satya Nadella. That guy can reason very deep and very high level. Super powerful. Doesn't mean he's writing every line of code, even remotely. I do think this is the world that we need to be prepared for, is you're going to move up the abstraction chain. You're going to move up the value chain. And the AI is going to keep chasing you. It's going to keep trying to do better and better up the value chain. But where the AI runs out of is data. It needs data to train on. Maybe the AI can start having its own self-learning. Like there's this whole idea of like world models, and that AI needs to interact with the world to learn how the world works and get smarter by doing that. But even that has limited applicability, and it takes time. And you can say, oh, speed it up by creating a virtual world and can interact with, and you can have, car driving simulations, a billion, simulations per second, and train the cars faster. Yes, but that's limited by our ability to virtualize, and our ability to virtualize is limited. Again, there's bottlenecks everywhere. This is not going to change overnight, but what is going to keep changing is, I think, the list of skills you have. I'm going to keep picking on one of them. There's one I have my own personal belief in because I have a bias on it, but I work in this space. I do think CSS skills will become less valuable. I'll take a simple example. My wife is taking a coding boot camp. She works in sales, and she wants to go into sales engineering. And so she's learning CSS. And the number one thing she keeps saying is like, why is this not just like automated for me? Like, why do I have to write this? Like, I've got a design or something, like it has all the details. Like, why is this not automated? And, as a reminder, like I make a product for that. And maybe that's why she has some bias here too. Doesn't mean that CSS knowledge is not super valuable. So I actually want to separate those things. I don't think people will think that writing, dot wrapper and then writing, border dash top var, blah, 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 and I think that's going to have way less value. But doesn't mean knowing CSS isn't super valuable, because sometimes, whether it's the AI or an intern or the combo plus an AI plus an intern, or just a code base that's been iterated on, sometimes you end up with some kind of CSS, some kind of like layout, and it's got a lot of CSS rules. And all you got to do is you got to do one tweak. Like all you got to do is you got to modify this to have one box in between the other boxes, right? That's all you need. You just need another column. And no matter what you do, everything blows up. The AI tries to modify it and everything blows up. It does a terrible job. It might iterate and try and it just fails. It's some weird cascading issue that some AI, and I do think AI increases the rate of problems like this, or the intern, or again, the senior devs, but each dev was writing things a little bit differently. And you're just in a pit of death, plateau of death, the human version. And CSS knowledge is super valuable, because then you can look in, you can inspect, you can be like, oh, this is this weird, like, people might be abusing things. Like they have a CSS grid, but they're like using it. There's a float inside the grid, which leads to like strange, it seemed to work for that layout, but doesn't work when you abstract it to other use cases. You can be like, oh, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. I'm just going to do or tweak this one thing, and boom. Now, how would an AI do it? An AI might just try and rewrite the whole thing. You don't want that, but that's how it's trained. Blah, blah, blah. Again, as we go up the value stack, let's say we've got these layers of abstraction. Day to day, we're not writing CSS. We don't value, let's say, basic CSS as much. But advanced CSS we need sometimes. And I think the more the AI, maybe we can just assume the AI will slowly work its way up. I don't think it's going to be like overnight. A lot of people are assuming like, oh, it's going to do everything tomorrow. No, not even remotely. But let's say it slowly works its way up. Humans will slowly work their way ahead. Now, you can maybe argue that AI can increase at a faster rate than humans can, but I don't buy that. Humans can adopt new skills quickly. An engineer can go into PM pretty immediately, to be honest. And a PM could be a CEO of a company pretty immediately. You're going to make mistakes, but you're a human interacting with humans. If you're a human who knows how to interact with other humans, and you're a human who knows how to interact with computers, make my little robot icon, you're in a pretty good starting point. You can learn, and luckily your own neural network can evolve over time too. And we need to continue to update our skills. But the reality is, you could say when AI can self-improve and AI learns faster, but don't forget, like, the human is on top of the AI. The human's using the AI, right? If the AI gets better at skills A, B, and C, well, now the human is too. by default, the human is better at everything AI got better at. And so we're going to use those things. I'll take a random example. I've never written a GitHub action in my life. I've used GitHub Actions. I've got a team of engineers who wrote and maintained all our GitHub Actions. I've never done it. I made a new project. I wanted to add a basic deploy button with a GitHub action. Never done it. Option one is read up a bunch of stuff, learn how to do it, blah, 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 blah. Option two is just tell the AI to do it. Because GitHub Actions are definitely in the tools the AI knows, especially when you know it's a basic use case. I just want the 50% use case. I want what most developers who've written an action to do. Is just a basic action. Now, will the AI debug a super complicated action effectively? Maybe, maybe not. But I know 0%. I am grateful to be 50% good suddenly. I wrote my action, I deployed it. I knew that there's going to be a plateau. If I tried to get more advanced or more intricate, it might start to fall apart, and I would need to actually have the knowledge. And that's where knowledge continues to have value. You will need to gather the knowledge. And there's some things that AI can be good at instantly, and now you're instantly good at it too. As the AI gets better, you keep going up, up, up. In fact, we can simulate that. Let's say the AI gets better at 10 more skills. You just go whomp up above. You can leverage those things. The human benefits from every AI advancement. We're always one step ahead of the AI in that way. We can use the AI in any way we want, and that 1% difference is always going to be where our value is. So I personally am not afraid of AI at all. There will be smart people with AI. There will be dumb people with AI. There will be nice people, there will be mean people. Everything's cat and mouse. Every software system can be infiltrated, and every vulnerability can be patched. And that's how the world works. You find a vulnerability, you patch the vulnerability. You make the software faster. You add features which make it slower, right? Everything is just cat and mouse balance. I don't believe AI is all good or bad. I don't think it's taking our jobs or changing our lives, but I also do think it'll evolve our jobs and our lives without a doubt. And I think resisting it's a bad idea. I think that saying, oh, this is bad, I'm not going to use it, is a terrible idea. Saying, oh, Copilot gave me one bad response that made me have to debug something for an hour that I wouldn't have otherwise, I'm never going to use it again. I don't think it's a good idea either. I use AI a lot. But I think saying, oh, I'm not going to learn any engineering skills because I don't need engineering skills to be able to build products is a terrible idea. If you care about building products that are any good, you should learn to code. You should use AI to generate code for you, and you should learn to code too. I don't believe in like Jensen Huang, who says, oh, AI will do all the coding, you don't need to know code. No, again, it's the 10% that matters. The AI will get everyone to 50%. And then your product needs to be 10% better to have any users, and that's where your skills come in. That's where the human comes in. No matter what, you're building products for humans. It's humans in, humans out, all the way down. Humans are every problem and every solution, no matter how good the technology underneath us is. You could say, so one argument is that if there's like, you could say, yeah, what if one of the evolutions is salaries get lowered? I actually don't think that's going to happen. In fact, accounting salaries went up after VisiCalc came out because it became more valuable. So if you imagine the programmer here and the set of AI skills that keeps growing, you keep having more value. And if you can, like in my experience, if you know some coding skill and the AI can generate a piece, but you can enhance that, you can debug that, you're familiar with everything it did, you're going to be able to work a lot more effectively than someone else who has those same underlying pieces but is not able to work with them as effectively as you. And this is what is it? Dang it. Somebody hold on. If that person's still here, somebody put in the chat the name of that law I wanted to come back to, which is that as something gets cheaper, the demand actually goes up. So it's almost like the reverse of supply and demand. Like or as the cost goes down, the appetite for it goes up. Somebody wrote it. And then I mentioned that's the one. Hold on, let's see if I can find this. Because it's really good. I think it's this one. Yes. So traditional supply and demand economics would say if everyone's a developer now, then the salary of a developer could go down. Now, I think the reality is, so Jevons paradox is a good example of, as something gets easier to produce, we want more of it. And because all, like, so if you haven't noticed, technology is extremely slow to develop, like painfully slow. Um, Maybe you don't notice this or you don't think about it because a lot of people here probably are a software engineer. But if you zoom out and imagine, like I said this, when I was in college, I had no engineering skills. I actually was a designer originally. I taught myself to do graphic design. And when I first started having to learn how to turn the design into a working product, I was like shocked at how long that took. Like I had learned the whole Adobe Creative Suite, or big chunks of it. You know, I can create photorealistic stuff with Photoshop and vectors and mock-ups in great detail with Adobe Illustrator. I would follow tutorials and make like Hollywood level motion graphics with After Effects. It was amazing. But actually coding something took orders of magnitude more time and effort. Oops, let me get Jevons paradox fully in the view here. I keep forgetting I'm cutting stuff off. And I think people forget, or they take it for granted, software takes forever. You have an idea, you know it's plausible, you know it's doable, and to bring that idea to production at a quality level that users need, whether you waterfall it, which I hope you don't, or whether you make an MVP and iterate with customer feedback, which I hope you do, it takes so long. If companies could build software faster, what's going to happen? They're just all going to compete, right? If each company can move 10x, they're all going to move 10x, and we're going to get better products. Like, consumers will benefit from this. All consumers will get better products, but the companies, it doesn't matter the absolute speed of anyone. It's always relative to someone else, right? If Claude 4 comes out and it's way better, Bolt, Cursor, Windsurf, all of them will get 5x better. But it doesn't matter. It's not an absolute measure. It just matters if Cursor is better than Windsurf. Then all the money goes to Cursor because all the users use Cursor. Like, not all of it. It's not like that black and white, but you get the idea. Similarly, these companies are foaming at the mouth to build better products, better AI products. And Jevons paradox basically says, there are some examples here. So this was sort of one of the old examples, which is that as cars get more fuel efficient, it increases fuel use net rather than decreases, because fuel cost was a limiting factor. So people will not drive long distances regularly because it was too expensive. We're talking like a long time ago. When cars get more fuel efficient, you would say, oh, there will be less demand on gas, the price will go down. Apparently, way back in the day, this did not happen. People wanted to go further, prices went up, demand went up. I firmly believe, because I've seen this my whole career, that is how software is. There's infinite value to be created in software. The biggest gating factor is it takes forever to produce. If we can produce more software faster, the appetite goes up proportionally, if not more so. I noticed this also when creating Builder. Like, as soon as you can create pages on your site faster, people want to create 10x, 100x more pages. And they start wondering, like, can we make 100 versions of each page, right? Can we run an A/B test of this page with 100 versions? Can we personalize it to 100 different cohorts of users or different audiences? Like, it just never ends. Or at least I'll say this, the end is nowhere in sight. And I would be surprised if it just suddenly hit us, personally. Okay, I have to wrap this up here pretty soon because I need to eat dinner. What am I missing, though? Am I getting anything, like, obviously wrong here? Because I want to put out more videos on stuff like this, on, like, just imagine we hit ASI. Imagine that the machine is super smart. O3 can solve problems no one else did. It doesn't mean there's not tons of other problems to solve to make O3 actually effective, and it doesn't mean that O3 is not just another tool in our arsenal. As if this is our AI foundation, that we can accomplish stuff. If the foundation gets bigger, that boosts us up. I understand somewhat why people intuitively think this, but a lot of people feel like it's going to be the opposite. They feel like they're here on the foundation of all the tools and technology that they've ever used or built. And, like, when the AI is bigger, it's going to, like, foreshadow them. And it's going to be like this evil, I'm thinking like the Eye of Sauron here. It's going to, like, attack them. It's like, what are you talking about? AI is a tool for humans by humans. You're on the thing gets better, you're on the next thing. My only personal recommendation would be learn to use the thing really, really, really well. If you can use the thing extremely effectively, then you can be effective in your job and you can maximize the benefit it has to you. What you want to be is, let's say this is magnified by your skill set, right? And so let's say we have the same foundation, but person A doesn't know how to use AI super well, and person B knows how to do it really well. AI is really dumb. AI's got a ton of problems. AI is full of flaws. But if you are good at maximizing the good parts and minimizing the bad parts, and you can be 10x more effective or whatever, that's where I think you want to be. Everyone wants to be. If you're going to be this naysayer, that's not wise. And don't get me wrong, I'm a big naysayer in terms of like there's a bunch of hype bullshit. Just don't forget marketing is marketing. OpenAI is heavily incentivized to say that the world's smartest models come out, and not mention that it's too costly for anyone to use, and that's probably not going to change anytime soon. O1, maybe we'll get a O1 optimized, and it'll be 10x better. I still don't know if it's going to replace GPT-4o. It's going to be a while. The benchmarks are where the hype comes from and the VC money comes from, but the benchmarks are not actually proof of usage. And Claude Sonnet is more used and just better. And I'm curious how Anthropic will respond to this stuff. But you definitely don't want to be the person that says like AI is changing the world overnight. It's not. If you ask your mom or dad or aunts and uncles, is AI changing your life? They're probably like, I don't know. I hear about it in the news a lot, but I don't use it. I don't know what the point is. And I've showed them. I say, hey, I've showed my parents this. Like, hey, just go to ChatGPT, search instead of Google. And it might be easier because it just tells you answers. It talks to you like a human. They're like, nah, doesn't appeal to me. And they tried it and they're like, no, I don't get it. Don't like it. Like, hey, I get it. It is changing the world and isn't. Everything didn't just change overnight. And it won't change overnight. And no, I don't think we're on forever. I think humans will have this debate. Oh, now we're at the singularity. Now we're at the point where things get better forever and never S-curve and plateau again. It's not going to happen. OpenAI will suggest that because it makes their stock price go up, and they have to. They have to justify this $100 billion fucking valuation, which is massive, and justify the fact that they're not about to get totally eaten away at by all these competitors. So many people replicating their models, free and open source. AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, they're all offering these things, and they're going to be offering better, faster, cheaper because they own the hardware, they own the compute, they own the whole stack. OpenAI has to suggest they're better. And all the influencers, all the creators, all the people making YouTube videos and blog posts, etc., are going to hype this stuff too. Why? Because people click on the O3 just changed the world forever post and video a lot more than they're going to click on O3 is, it's cool, but it's whatever. And so in my opinion, learn how to use the AI, but be somewhere in between here. O3 is interesting. How could I use that? Let me think about it. The world didn't change overnight, and it's not ever going to not plateau in some ways at some point. There have been 10-year AI winters. There have been explosions in AI progress and then many-year winters. When I went to college studying AI, we were in an AI winter. There has been many of these. I mean, one was like pre and post back propagation algorithm. There's so many of these things. There's always, we hit limits of physics, we hit limits of other technologies that need a breakthrough, whether it's search, retrieval, whatever it might be. It's going to happen. But be the person who can use the AI maximally. Be the person standing on the shoulders of giants, using what we have as effectively as possible. And don't be the person not using it. I would recommend, if you want my really quick recommendation, here's what I like to do. I write code with Cursor. I like it. Use the composer. I like to use agent mode. Have it play around with what it's good at and not. It's not good at lots of stuff. And it's surprisingly good at some stuff. Hell yes, do that. Encourage your team members to do it too. It's awesome. And then if you want to take things a step further, build an AI product or project. Use Claude 3.5 Sonnet. Play with it. I'm going to make a web app that has an input box, and then I send something to Sonnet and I get something back. Claude. What is Claude's logo? It's sort of like it's like this kind of thing. Yeah, it's kind of a weird meshy thing. I like to do that because then you start to see what's good at, what's not. Make a code generation product. Upload your screenshot, get code out, and be like, oh, that's not quite good. Start messing with the prompts to get better code. Make tools that make your workflow easier. I've made a bunch of tools. I made a tool for like filtering candidates when people apply to us. I made a tool for editing our content for grammar. we made another tool. We've made so many internal AI tools that are actually really useful that people use. John made a GPT clone with Quick. That's awesome. Make clone other products just to learn how they're built. Like it's interesting to push these LLMs and see whether they're good or not. The more you use them, the more you realize the big buckets of just not good and good. And the not good bucket is way bigger than the good bucket. Do not get me wrong. But the good bucket can be super useful. I built this stateofai.tools site. Oh, we can't go to it anymore because the survey's closed. Weekend, AI, all the UI. I didn't design any of it, all the logic. Now I had to debug. There's a really, really hairy bug in here, and this tends to happen. I built this best of web. This one I did mostly with Windsurf. This one I did mostly with Cursor. They're pretty much the same thing, to be honest. A lot of cool stuff in here. I learned a lot of stuff. Like one is a lot of these pages and contents were AI generated, and I got a $4,000 a day Anthropic bill. So again, you learn a lot of things, where the limits of these products are, but use AI to make yourself more superpowered. I'll probably make a video on this sometime soon, some of the videos. I really want to test out Klein more in depth. I've actually done a lot of testing, get a video on that. If y'all think there's anything I should make a video on, let me know. Otherwise, I gotta leave from now. I had a lot of fun. Thank you all for joining the stream. Let me know your thoughts on all this stuff separately. I'll trying to get in the habit of streaming more often now too. And so let me know what you thought about it, tweet at me, etc.